What's up, guys? We're live now. I did a AMA on my IG a few days ago. I plan to go over some of those questions here. It was an overwhelming amount, and frankly, I've been way too busy to just dedicate individual videos to each one as I was planning on doing so. So we might go through some of those here, and then I'll see if I can get snippets of that conversation and then post that as individual videos. We also received a lot of hate recently. The ACP did. We received quite a bit of hate from this CPUSA lady that came out and said a lot of mean things about us that weren't true. And I did a reply video earlier today. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm also going to, as always, give up an opportunity for anyone who hates the ACP or is just not informed about what we do. Anyone who has drank the Kool-Aid about the ACP being Nazbol or whatever the fuck they say. I'm going to give you all an opportunity to come on and talk to me as one of the leaders of the party. And we can just shit talk a little bit about the halftime show. I hate how much I liked it. I didn't watch the game. I didn't do, the thing that most people do where they get together and just watch the game. I was actually working out in the middle of the game, and I ended up watching just a little clip from the halftime show, and I thought it was pretty cool, man. I'm not gonna lie. With my background as a Cuban American, it was pretty badass to see that representation on there. Now I know it's like just bourgeois identity politics, tokenization, but it's still cool, Sometimes you have to tip your hat to the bourgeoisie for being artful in their propaganda. But I don't know. I think Bad Bunny's cool. I've heard him speak out against colonialism in Puerto Rico and against ICE, and it's bourgeois progressivism at the end of the day. But we're gonna have a fun program today. I'll also do, I guess, kind of an AMA with whoever's here. CPU shirt, and yeah, man, it's crazy that there's still people going to CPUSA. Like, why not just join the DSA? It's virtually the same thing. Both are appendages of the Democratic Party. Both are aligned on all of the identity politics issues, which is where they draw the red line, right? If they drew the red line on imperialism, they couldn't have the policy that they take to elections that they do. If they drew the red line on like the ascension of fascism within the country, they also couldn't do that because, there's been a somewhat acceleration with Trump. At least it seems that way. But the precondition for all this was based on the Democrats. It was with the Democrats that the Uhuru movement people, who I don't agree on a lot of stuff with, but they had their houses raided by the FBI, and it was under a Democratic administration where a ton of people were censored, all because they questioned the narrative around the proxy war against Russia. And look, I don't give a fuck what you think about that conflict. I don't care if you agree with us that it's a proxy war of NATO and imperialism against Russia. Even if you hold the idea that Russia's an imperial power and yada, 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 who the fuck are you to support the censoring of Americans who have a different view on that event? But that happened during Democratic administrations. Our friends Jackson Hinkle and Haas got censored. Midwestern Marx got censored. People forget for like a whole 6 months we couldn't make any donations on YouTube. And that was, I want to say 30-40% of the money we were making as an institute. So all of that happened under Democratic administrations, and this cope of, the fascism just started with Trump. I don't buy that. So the point being, like, if you're actually against fascism, why would you take any of the positions that are taken either by the so-called CPUSA, has nothing CP about it, or the DSA, right? Do you work with PSL? Not at the moment. We've always been open to working with anyone who agrees with us on principle stuff. Thoughts on the PSL? There's a guest here, I think. There was a guest. I'm not seeing them anymore. They must have left. Look, guys, we're not against working with anyone who agrees with us on the principal things at hand. So if you think the class struggle is what we should be focused on and not identity politics or divisive cultural issues, if you think that imperialism is the principal contradiction and we should be organizing against war, imperial war, and we should try to connect the things that the U.S. is doing abroad to what happens back home at the ranch, you know, as they say, we'll work with you. Thank you for the thing. We'll, of course, work with you. That doesn't mean we have to join within the same organization. We can keep organizational sovereignty, but why not work and build coalitions around the issues that we share agreements on? Let's see. Is the black pill real communism? Real under communism? No. There's this quote that Lenin has where he says something along the lines of, the only people that are pessimistic are the people that are like liberals and not Marxists. If you're an actual Marxist, you have this world historical perspective where you realize that you are a fucking idiot if you think something is not going to change. That's literally what every ruling class throughout history has foolishly thought. They've participated in the folly, in the Erasmus style folly, where they think, oh, it's going to be like this forever. It's going to be like this forever. It was meant to be like this. It was made like this by the gods. It was made like this by nature. Capitalism is human nature. Yeah, fuck that. No, it's not. It was a product of history, of certain contradictions that previous systems had. That those systems developed and then undeveloped and gave way to new ones. And the same way that the planter class and the slave owners thought, I'm going to have my slaves forever. And then the feudal lords thought, hey, we're going to be here forever. After all, we're put into these positions by the gods. And that's what these peasants think. And they're going to think that forever. And insofar as they do, we'll keep our position of power. Then you have the capitalist class that in one moment in history was revolutionary. They overthrew feudal privileges. Yeah, they were pretty based for a period of time. They were the revolutionary class in many ways. The ideas of Marxian socialism stem from some of the most dissident and critical currents of this period of bourgeois revolutions. Republicanism plays a very, very important role in the development of Marxist thought. In many ways, the people that in the second half of the 19th century would become the base of the socialist movement, the Marxist socialist movement, those people before were the base of republicanism, which was seen as the dissenters to the status quo. So liberalism was always seen as dissenter. They didn't want universal suffrage. They only wanted educated people to vote. Conservatives were the ones that were looking back towards the aristocracy and that wanted to limit bourgeois democracy as much as possible. Thank you so much. Comrade Corvid, good comrade here in ACP, Texas. And then the Republicans were the people that wanted to expand the franchise to everyone. Right? Republicanism was like the popular, almost like working class, even though they didn't have a class analysis, movement in the beginning of bourgeois civilization, of capitalist civilization. And then you have the development of socialism. So, yeah, to conclude my response to you, no, you can't have a black pill under communism. You can't have a black pill if you have a Marxist analysis of the world. Communism is going to triumph. You know, there's no way around it. Even this doomerism about the environment, yes, you need to build what the Chinese call an ecological civilization. But I don't buy this doomerism that everything's going to collapse if we don't develop communism fast enough. Like, no, communism is such an advanced form of intercourse, so integrated into the metabolism of nature, as Marx emphasizes in the third volume of Capital, that with the development of the productive forces, we are going to figure out ways to deal with the climate crisis. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't pay attention to it. We, of course, should, but, I think we need to have a deeper level of faith in history and recognize that it's heading somewhere and it's heading towards communism. It's that MLK quote of the arc of history bends towards justice. Well, that cosmic justice, if you want to look at it in a millenarian sense, that cosmic justice is communism. Where's ACP the most active? Are you in Cali? No, I'm not in California, but Cali's of course super active. It's the biggest chapter we have, but we have a ton of chapters that are very active. We have the Florida chapter in Central Florida. I mean, the stuff the guys are doing in Central Florida is just fucking amazing. They have their own gym, like their literal own fucking gym where they do not only lifting, but they do martial arts training. Super cool. The people that are there that are ACP people are called Real. If you look up REAL, like Real, on IG, you're going to find them. Amazing organization. Most of the leadership, if not all of it, is ACP, and it's a great funnel into the party. Very grassroots. They give out like 300 meals a week. They work with local Haitian and African and Puerto Rican organizations in the region. A lot of cool stuff coming from there. They recently had an event at UCF for the ACP Student League, and it was incredible. It was the first event, 60-something people in one room. Try to get any other leftist organization to do a student event at a university and try to get more than 20 people. Like, try to get more than 20 people. You know how fucking hard it is to get students that are concerned with a million different things to come out for a communist event. And we got 60-something people in Florida, one of the most militantly anti-communist states in the country. So yeah, we got great stuff going on in Florida. In South Florida right now, our guys are going to city council meetings in Miami-Dade, in Broward County. So these cats are in Hialeah. They're in Little Havana. By the way, for those that know, I grew up in Hialeah. Hialeah, Little Havana. They're getting harassed. They're getting threatened by the Cuban gusaneria. And they're still out there with the fucking flags, standing on business, standing against the imperialist war of aggression on Cuba, on Venezuela, on Africa, standing on business. And we have a ton of people in these parts of the country that you would assume are just militantly anti-communist, because a part of them are. But where you find that militant anti-communism, you also tend to find its opposite. There's also many chapters around the country doing great work. I know Texas is doing a lot of good work, a lot of community service and cleanup. Whenever there's floods, they're the first ones on the scene helping people. New York and New Jersey have been doing a lot of good work organizing truckers. That slowed down a little bit in the last few months, but I'm sure they're gonna pick it back up as new opportunities open themselves up. Chicago, Illinois always does great work. We have a really good scene in the Chicago area, a big density of people. So if you're in Chicago, join the party, man. We have so many comrades there. It's like the center of the country. The old CPUSA, which we are continuing the legacy of. The old CPUSA used to feel that Chicago had to be the real capital of the country. And we kind of, at least I personally agree with that. Most of our events are in Chicago. We have a really good space there called the Chicago Worker School in one of these working class towns. And I'm not going to say the specific town, but in one of these working class towns in Chicago. And we do events there all the time. Who's my favorite communist leader? That's a really good question. I think at a very personal level, probably Fidel, because I'm Cuban. From the moment I was politicized, I've been listening to his speeches, so it's very much, it has shaped how I have come to think about communism. But the one that I think had probably the biggest impact so far is either Mao or Stalin. All right, there's someone here that's a guest. I want to have quick conversations if it's people that are supporting us. Creeper Man.
Yeah, Mao killed and Stalin killed a ton of people, so I just want to let you know that they are a big influence on the communists.
All right, that was fucking retarded. If someone wants to debate ACP or something else, I'm not going to sit here on a Sunday night, the Lord's Day, and just debate a bunch of slop about communist pseudo-history, a bunch of bullshit that comes from the Black Book of Communism. That's not true. For anyone interested, I just did an interview with... That was such a Haas move of me. I don't usually do that, but it's Sunday. I work like 5 jobs. If I'm going to have a conversation, I want it to be one that I enjoy. I don't want to have to redo the same thing I do all the time, which is talk about China, talk about the Soviet Union. I just had a long-ass conversation with Rathbone. You guys should know Rathbone. He was very huge here on TikTok before he got sniped by the Zios a million times. I just had a conversation with him about the Judeo-Bolshevism myth, the myth that the Soviet Union killed however many Christians, all that garbage. I just spoke to him about that for like an hour and a half a couple days ago. The Django girl has me pissed off all day. Yeah. Look, I'm not letting it get to me. I'm really not, because you shouldn't. But yeah, I mean, the thing that gets the closest to getting me is that I understand that when she says those sorts of things about ACP, it's not like when someone goes into the comment section and just calls me names. I'm used to that. I don't care for that. And I just let that slide. But I know that when she offends the ACP, she's offending something that's just beyond me. You know, it's something that implies, that implicates many of my comrades who are spending countless hours around the country busting their ass to serve their communities, to stand on business and show what communists are all about. And it's how the offense on the ACP and its dignity is intimately tied to the to offending my comrades. That's what, you know, usually ticks me off. But you know, there were people that asked me if I got pissed off that she was like calling me the Cuban guy or whatever. No, I don't care. I wasn't planning to respond, but it started getting a little bit of traction, and then I was like, all right, fuck it, we have to respond to this. I mean, the claims are so stupid, so incredibly stupid. She claimed that we were trying to organize landlords, which is fucking ridiculous. And it's so hypocritical considering her party has millions and millions of dollars in real estate assets. Millions of dollars. I only brought up one, which was the New York office, mainly because I wanted to get it under 3 minutes so I could put it up as a reel, because if not, the ability to get viewers is much less. But holy fuck, man, talk about throwing stones in a glass house. What's going on here? Nice. Bad Bunny gives Grammy to a kid kidnapped by ICE. Maria Corina Machado gives her Nobel War Prize to Donald Trump. You have two paths, Hispanic man. You have two paths. Realistically, both of those, Bunny's probably closer to Corina Machado than we are to him, but in any case. Can your party win 2% of the votes? No. No shot. We're too young in the sense of we haven't had time to build up as we have to build up. We don't want to be like these other leftist organizations that just run futile campaigns. If we run campaigns, it's going to be shit we can win. And so far, we've only ran 2 campaigns, and both of them we have won. We won the position of High Bailiff in Orange County, Vermont, and then we also won a position within the Arts Committee of City Council in Dubuque, Iowa. So we've only ran twice, and we're 2 for 2. We're not going to just be running campaigns for the sake of doing that. It's a waste of resources. We'll run campaigns when we've integrated ourselves in communities enough to be able to win, you know, to be able to have it almost like self-evident to the people that would be the constituency, that we're the guys that are there to represent them. Do we have anyone running? No, not yet. So you're proud of 60 people? Yeah, we're proud of having 60 people show up in a college campus for a political event of an organization that doesn't get millions of dollars of funding from big NGOs or whatever the fuck. Yeah, that's a pretty high group of people. No, it's not illegal to start a communist party. PCP, ACP. Which one's is that the Peruvian Communist Party? ACP views on trans people. Our Constitution outlines that you cannot discriminate against anyone. If an adult wants to do whatever they want to do, you know, we respect their ability to do what they want, and we're not going to enforce any position on anyone within the party. So, yeah, as long as people are not getting discriminated, we have a few members that are trans. They've never complained. On the contrary, some of them are the most ardent defenders of our party online, because the main thing that comes up is this trans stuff, and they can attest to the fact that once you inhabit our spaces and you see the party culture, it's not any of the shit that these fucking people say online. It's like, sure, we have a good chunk of our party that come from conservative backgrounds, a good chunk of people that came from MAGA, and they have different social views on that question. That doesn't mean that they don't fucking treat people with basic dignity. I mean, everyone's a human being. They have a basic foundational value as a human being, and they should be treated with dignity. So, you know, even if someone disagrees with the metaphysics and the way of thinking about gender or sex that led someone to become trans, that doesn't mean they're not going to obtain the respect of that other person and be treated with dignity. I mean, ask the people in the party that are trans. Some of these people have YouTube channels and defend this all the time. So, Hinkle's not 5'2". I'm like 5'11", and I want to say Jackson's like around my height. Maybe a little bit taller, maybe a little bit shorter, I can't remember. I should debate Django. Yeah, I'd be interested in debating Django. I wouldn't mind. But she said that we don't deserve free speech. All right, there's another person here, Wasaman. I'm going to let him in, and then I'll get back to the chat.
So,
hey, what's up? How's it going?
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm 18, okay? So, let's say, if I was a communist, why would I care for other countries' liberation?
Because we live in a system of capitalism that is globalized, and nothing happens without it affecting everything else. And as Dr. King used to say, the bombs thrown in Vietnam land in Detroit. It's not a coincidence that as U.S. imperialism continues to extend its tentacles across the world, trying to loot resources and asset strip other countries, the American people have simultaneously become poorer, more indebted, and more desperate. The empire, as Michael Parenti was fond of saying, feeds off of the republic. So you, as a working class person in the heart of the empire, have a vested interest in giving a shit about what your government is doing abroad, because it's your kids that are sent off to die. It's your tax dollars that are used to carry out war, and wars that only profit a group of individuals that you'll never see in your life, because these are the fucking rich parasites that if you see them, it's like you're cleaning their house or you're fixing something in their house. You're not going to see them in the same social spaces. They're going to be in their own clubs. They're going to be on islands that we all know of. So that's why you should care, because it's intimately tied to your interests as a regular working class person.
I mean, bro, I'm Cuban. My grandpa died in Angola.
Holy shit, there you go. I don't have to explain this to you then.
Yeah, but why did he die? I don't have nothing to do with it. I'm not racist. I know many Angolans, and they're my friends.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have nothing to do with them.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a different question, because I thought you were speaking from the standpoint of an American, like in the U.S. As a Cuban, the principle that guided them was internationalism. This idea that that the vested interest of the Cuban people's struggle against imperialism was intimately tied to supporting these struggles against apartheid and against colonialism in Africa. And look, in communist history, different countries think about those sorts of things differently. The Chinese have an attitude that's basically reducible to, we don't want to meddle in any country's affairs, whether it's to defend their sovereignty or not. We're just going to let them figure it out on their own, and we're just going to step back and not do anything. That's the attitude they've had for a while. I mean, they condemn violations of international law. in the United Nations and stuff like that. But the point that I'm getting at is that two countries that are both communist, that are both led by communist parties like Cuba and China, have had different politics and different policies with regards to these questions. So it's not a one-size-fits-all sort of thing. The Cuban people, as you all know, we have síndrome de Bingu, which means we have a big dick syndrome, big dick energy. I guess it doesn't translate as good to English. But we do have a deep feeling, as Che Guevara said, that an injustice in any corner of the world offends us deeply. And we go out and we fight against it. And it's tough because I know if I don't know if you said your grandpa or your father died, but that generation, a lot of Cubans died. A lot of Cubans shed blood in the struggle for Angolan freedom and African freedom against colonialism. There was shows done after it that have shaped the collective memory of the period for individuals like my parents, right? Songs. There's one from Pablo Milanés, Ya se va aquella edad. That was the one that was used in the show of these kids that went to Angola. And there's this one gut-wrenching scene. I have chills just thinking about it, where they come back and they have to go to the guy's girlfriend and basically let her know that he died. And that was very, very tough. A lot of people suffered. I'm guessing your family was struck by that. But your grandpa was a martyr fighting for justice. Now you could have said maybe his attention should have been paid just to his family or something like that. I don't know, right? These questions go in many ways beyond politics, right? There's this...
They got the land take.
They got the what?
They were landowners.
They had their...
Communists with Fidel.
Wait, can you repeat that? I didn't hear what you said.
They were landowners,
Mhm.
but they turned communist.
All right, that's dope. Those are good class traders. I had one part of my family, a somewhat distant family, like a sister of an uncle, an aunt, a distant aunt that I never got to meet, who had like 3 bars in Cuba. And when the revolution came, they like took 2 from them and just gave it to like other people so that those spaces could be controlled by other people, and she wouldn't just have a monopoly in that block on bars. But yeah, I don't know.
I got a question. If I wasn't a Spaniard, you know that the existence of other nations like as Catalonia or País Vasco, it would be threatening to my nation, so it would not be good. Why would I support that?
Can you rephrase your question? I couldn't understand it.
If I was a Spaniard,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's a cross of Bergen in my profile.
Mm-hmm.
If the País Vasco was independent or wanted to be, and Catalonia and Galicia, it would be a threatening to the national unity.
Yeah.
So, how does internationalism applies there?
Well, that's a different civilizational question, right? I think that those countries are part of the common civilizational project of Spain. I know there's independence movements there, and I know the predominant Spanish left supports them. I don't know if I feel the same way about it as they do. I think that this late in the game, these attempts at balkanization, at just making more and more tiny nations, are futile. I'm thinking in civilizational terms. I think we need a Pan-Americanism in the Middle East, a Pan-Arabism in Africa, a Pan-Africanism. And when it comes to Spain, you know, I do think that keeping that civilizational unity, seeing what possibilities of having an Ibero unity with Portugal are possible for a unified civilizational project. That's the only way that they're going to be able to defend themselves against impositions from the EU, against impositions from the US, which is where it all comes from. So yeah, that would be my perspective. One of my good friends, Santiago Mesilla, would probably take it even further and say that the Hispanic civilizational project is linked to everything that belonged to the former Spanish Empire. I don't agree with that, but I do think that, you know, they have all their right to affirm themselves as a civilization and to not have historic parts of Spain just ripped from it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, also Primo de Rivera talked about it, and he said that Spain was a union of eternal values.
A union of what?
That was made Spain.
Okay.
Such eternal values as Catholicism, Spanish, the culture, and the unity.
Yeah, I mean that's a deep philosophical question. What is it that becomes the locus, the most important part of a civilization? Is it institutions? Is it language? Is it values? Is it a deeper sense of being in the world, how you relate to things at not just a conceptual but preconceptual level? Yeah, and the question becomes for a lot of these people that are within the movement, the Vanguardia movement of Armesia, like, are these parts of the world that for a certain period of time were a part of the Spanish Empire, are they Spanish? Are they part of the Spanish civilization? Are they something else? We tend to think they are something else, that they do carry with them a synthesis that includes a Spanish component that's very important, but also an African and also an indigenous component that cannot be lost sight of. But I am going to let you go there. Thank you for your questions. I have quite a few questions here in the chat.
Jose Primo. He was the founder of the Falange.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, sounds good. Thank you. Bye. All right. Guys, I really want to talk about American communist stuff. So if you hate the ACP, please come up. I appreciate these discussions about Spain and stuff, but let's I want to try to see if I can speak to people that are anti-ACP. All right, Splats Loki. Splats, hello, are you 18?
Yeah, I'm actually 47.
Okay, I don't, yeah. Okay, do you have a question?
Yeah, you've got a bit of an echo. Look, I'm a U.S. Navy veteran. I'm a Democrat, which is as close as you're going to get in the U.S. to center-left. But my family is communist. We're from Chile, and I was born in Norway, which, you know, they have their own ideas of socialist democrats. Long story short, in the U.S., regrettably, because of the Red Scare all throughout the 80s, the Cold War, and because of the popularity of the extreme right, which has now manifested as MAGA, as far as I can tell, the communism in the U.S. is non-existent. I mean, we had people like Colonel West and DSA, and we got some outliers like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Cortez.
Yeah. So the essence of your question is that communism is non-existent currently in the U.S. I have to recycle guests as quick as possible. So if you have another part of your question, please be brief.
So my question to you would be, assuming that my position is correct, what should the communist platform in the U.S. be to come to prominence? Because we're not exactly popular yet.
Yeah. I think the first thing I would say is that communism has never left America. It's functioned as a constant, eternal specter that has haunted all forms of politics. I mean, when Trump does something that's considered quote-unquote authoritarian by the liberals, he's called a communist. Sometimes he's called a fascist, but for liberals, those two are sometimes almost interchangeable. The Democrats are, of course, always called communist by the Republicans. So it's this weird phenomenon where communism has no political representation in the US, but yet it is everywhere. Everyone gets called a communist because that's like the dirty word. I think we're heading in the trajectory of a serious crisis of legitimacy. I disagree with your wholesale condemnation of MAGA as right wing. I do think there is a working class part of MAGA that I experienced and lived with as someone that had to spend 4 years in Iowa and then 6 in southern Illinois. These are people that supported Trump not because of the bigotry, but in spite of it. They supported Trump because he presented himself as being against the system, against the deep state, as wanting to drain the swamp, as being the pro-peace president, as someone that's going to reindustrialize the country. And we communists, we knew he wasn't going to do any of that. We knew he didn't do any of that in his first term, and it wasn't just because he had bad people around him, but because the system precludes you the ability to do that in the first place. And so we came to realize that this sector of working class people that support Trump because his presentation is as a populist style figure, this sector of people was primed to be organized by communists because only communists can bring about the things that they liked in Trump. Now, we also saw the same potential in 2015 and 16 with the people that supported Bernie Sanders and that also got conjoined with the support of the Squad and all the people that you mentioned, although they were, by the time they come around, the movement's already almost dead, not unified in the same way it was in 2015 and 2016. In any case, I don't think that communist politics is going to come to America through elections in the same way that the Democratic Socialists and the DSA is carrying out their vision for change within the Democratic Party. I don't think that's even left wing. I'll explain why. Historically, left wing has meant standing against the system. That's what it meant when the Jacobins were called left wing during the French Revolution. They stood against the feudal system, the hegemony of the church, and the powers at be. The system as a whole, right? Not just one faction or whatever. Then in the 20th century and in the late 19th century, when capitalism becomes hegemonic worldwide, what becomes the left wing? Well, the left wing becomes the Marxists, the socialists, the people that wanted a whole new type of society, that wanted a revolutionary change to society, that stood against the system. In that sense, none of these people, whether it's Bernie, who classified what he was doing as a political revolution, I was naive enough to believe him and dedicate hundreds, if not thousands of hours to trying to get him elected in Iowa, and we succeeded. Even though the charts when we started were not pointing towards that direction. These people, whether Zoran or all of these DSA types, they're not actually standing against the system by the virtue of the fact that they are working within one of the parties that is archetypical of the system, which is the Democratic Party. Now, think what you want of it. You can think that, well, this party is better for working class people at home. It gives them more benefits. I would even go as far as to say I maybe don't disagree. I don't disagree, but it still stands as the archetypical party of the system. If you look at the institutions that are labeled as the deep state, the security state, a lot of these people have historically been way more sympathetic to the Democrats than even to the Republicans. And I don't mean that in a partisan sense of, oh no, the Republicans are no, they both play an essential role in keeping the system going. They have certain subtle differences when it comes to the welfare state or identity politics issues, trans issues, whatever. But the fundamental economic basis of both of their programs, the fundamental basis of foreign policy is the same. And so any left-wing movement has to, by nature, by definition, it must operate outside of these two-party duopolies. Because it's not a question of, well, is there a president of the Democratic Party being changed? I mean, we've seen the last 10 years, nothing has really came out of that type of politics that you're mentioning, the DSA type. But the question is, what is the Democratic Party? Is it just this like loose association? No, it's an institution with certain barriers and limits And when you go in it, you might think, oh, I'm going to break through them and do all these things and I'm going to change it drastically. No, you're not. And if you had the tremendous will to actually do that, why wouldn't you just have gone and built an alternative organization? There's someone fucking doing stupid shit in the comments. Hold up. Why is it asking me 30 different questions to hate speech? All right. Give me a second, because there's... All right. Why are the comments still there? What the fuck? All right.
To reduce your comments, hit mute.
Yeah.
And I went to block him. He had 1 follower.
Yeah. Those are people just trying to get the live shut down. Because the more stuff like that they put, the less it gets recommended to people. But the point being, like, any organization that is actually left-wing in this country has to work outside of the two-party duopoly. That's our perspective. And we don't think communism is going to come through this, like, great revolutionary event that, like, overthrows the way that everything is. No, I mean, historically, every single communist or socialist revolution that we've seen, what people haven't noticed is that the structure it takes is the following. The ruling order collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. When the Bolsheviks come to power, you had not only the February Revolution that was made in the aftermath of the ruling class, the ruling czarist class not being able to rule anymore. And so these bourgeois socialists come to power. They show themselves not able to rule anymore. And in this collapse, in this period of constitutional crisis and civil war, is when the Bolsheviks grab power. The same thing happens in China. So what we think is that this country is heading towards civil war. The fractures that are put in place, and a lot of them are partisan in character, like these fights that are going on over who controls what armed body of the state, whether it's ICE as a private militia of Trump or the national security and the National Guard in various states, excuse me. These are real clashes that are setting the foundation for a potential civil war. And the point is, when that comes, who's going to have a program that can unify the nation? Is it going to be the Groypers and the racists that want tribal politics? No. Is it going to be the same people that had a type of politics that led to the collapse? No. In our view, it's going to be the communists that are going to present a vision for unifying America and actually having government of, by, and for the people. So the terms in which you're thinking, it's like, how are you guys going to win and do elections? We're not thinking in those terms. We think this is a train heading in a very dark direction. And I hope I'm very wrong, but I think the American people are going to have to go through the dark side first. They're going to end up going through the dark side first before they realize, well, we need something that's radically different.
Okay, well, I don't disagree. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
And this is going to meander a little bit. But first, I just want to mention that I had another content creator, they made a direct comparison between identity politics with the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Mm-hmm. They were basically saying, like, it's a microcosm of what happened over there back then. And I thought that was an interesting argument. Whether it's right or wrong, I'll leave it up to you.
No, I don't think that's...
That wasn't the question.
Okay, go ahead.
The preamble. The second preamble is the Soviets. It was very localized government, and there are people who are actually talking about, if we go through this dark time, there could be like almost a balkanization of the United States, in which case I think communism has a chance by doing a Soviet-style model, and I'm talking about Bolshevik revolution, very localized government. That's what I'm actually talking about. Soviets is just nomenclature. It's a point of reference. But the question I actually have is, right now, the Mormons, the evangelicals, and the Southern Baptists have officially come out in support of Trump. Even back under Bush Jr., Mike Pence, he's very religiously fanatical. They've been talking about theocracy for a while, and now there's a lawyer called Michael Ferris who represents the National Religious Broadcasters. He's challenging the Johnson Amendment. So it looks like they're going after the separation of church and state. Do we, as communists, try to dispel the notion that we're godless atheists by aligning ourselves with certain churches the way the right wing has, or do we go straight atheist?
No, of course. I mean, the American people are very religious people, at least some of them are. And the way that we talk about communism at the ACP is as the culmination of the tradition of the prophets, the culmination of the Abrahamic tradition. We see communism as, the natural development of the sort of political ethos, of the ethos of justice that you can find in Jesus Christ. As a philosopher, I also see, the same thing as true with philosophy, but the wisdom of these traditions gets embodied and realized, I think, in the struggle for a communist society. So I don't think, the reply to that is atheism. I think that as our party has done, we have already collaborated with various churches in the South. When disaster struck North Carolina with the hurricanes, we worked very closely with churches to hand out aid and to help those communities. And we have worked with different churches around the country, different religious initiatives. I believe the Dorothy Day Catholic Worker Organization, we've collaborated with them in California, if I'm not mistaken. So, and even the discourse of the party is one that tries to emphasize, if you're a Christian, you should kind of be a communist, right? Because that's the most compatible with Christian values and the Christian spirit. So that's how I would answer that one. As far as the China and the culture, I mean, I've seen Bill Maher make this argument that on the basis of both of them having a certain way of canceling opposition, they're similar in modus operandi. It's not true, because in the Cultural Revolution, one of the things that was huge was debate, having the ability to debate, like defend your position. Show us how, we're going to put your feet to the fire, and if we think you're a capitalist roader, we're going to put your feet to the fire. But you have always the right to defend your position. You always have the right and in that sense, it's almost like in the spirit of J.S. Mill, right? J.S. Mill's On Liberty and the role of free speech in the health of a society. That was the spirit of the Cultural Revolution. And yes, it was brutal with people that weren't capable of standing on business correctly and defending their position. It was also a society under immense pressure and imperialist assault, and it was trying to carry out this very radical transformation at the level of culture, at the level of people's everyday being. Now, cancel culture is completely different. Cancel culture is the removal of any capacity to even debate, right? You are guilty from the start on the basis of identity politics. What matters is the form. Someone could be a lifelong anti-racist activist, but God forbid they use words that they can't use or say a joke or something like that. There's no spirit of like, people can say things tongue-in-cheek just to be funny, and maybe it lands in some spaces, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's a bad context to say something in, but it doesn't automatically mean that just because you say something provocative to try to be funny, that you are a racist or whatever. Like, what matters for identity politics and for wokeism and cancel culture is the superficial layer of what is said, right? Go ahead.
Generally speaking, we tend to cancel people who already have notoriety or popularity. It's like very pointless to cancel a nobody. In which case, when we cancel somebody, isn't that class warfare? We're going after rich people and their influence.
No, I've seen. Maybe you're just not in the environments that that show this, but someone like Adolf Reed Jr., one of the preeminent scholars in American socialism. He's not from my tradition. He's a DSA style person, writes for Jacobin every once in a while. He was supposed to speak to the New York City DSA a few years ago. I want to say in 2018, 2019. His event got canceled because he wrote an article on the website Non-Site questioning some of the presumptions behind what he classified as trans ideology. That was someone that was canceled. That wasn't someone in power or whatever. That's someone that's just a theorist that has fought his whole life against oppression, whose father fought his whole life against oppression as a black communist, and he was canceled. There's many such instances that I so many, as someone who has been in organizing spaces, of normal working class people that just because they don't have the HR, PMC gibber speak, just because they don't pray at the altar of pronouns and put pronouns on their shirt and do this whole song and dance, that they get canceled and they get defamed and they get maligned and they get prevented from getting certain positions, even though they might be 10 times more educated than the people that are coming after them. One of my best friends, Noah Krashevic, lifelong worker. He's a working class union carpenter. He's one of the directors of the Midwestern Marx Institute that I work for, and one of the executives at the American Communist Party that I'm also an executive at. When he was in the CPUSA many years ago trying to organize it, as someone who's very educated and a working class person, he had to endure this stupidity from this woke cancel culture liberalism. And it resembles the way of operating of a human resource department, which is thoroughly managerial, thoroughly PMC, and thoroughly anathema to working class people. You go to any working class job site around the country, and what you're going to find, in most places, right, is diversity. You're going to find black people, Hispanics, white people, and there's going to be this certain playfulness of race, this making of jokes with each other and busting each other's balls. That sort of thing, that's the working class culture. Try to reproduce that in an HR setting or in a leftist organizational setting. You're going to get canceled. You're going to get called one thing or another. And that's just the fact. Now it's changing. I think as of the last year, it's been changing. But that has nothing to do with like what happened in the Cultural Revolution.
Well, with disparate factions, and we have disparate factions. We've got Latinos, we've got African Americans, we've got people in diaspora, we've got people in the developing world, we've got workers, we've got disabled, we've got intellectuals, and we've got fighters. And one of the coalition members is the LGBTQ. By doing this, I think you called it song and dance, aren't we respecting allies? Aren't we earning that allyship?
I think that even that discussion of allyship, and I think that's all liberal buzzwords. I don't agree with any of that. You're supposed to treat people with dignity, irrespective of anything. I may personally disagree with the whole pronouns thing, but I'm not going to treat someone like an asshole. I'm going to treat them with dignity. If they want me to call them something, I'll call them that. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort, but I'll still think what I'll think, right? And that's not necessarily wrong. That's in fact a position that most communist states around the world, have, that most anti-imperialist states around the world have. And that doesn't mean that I think less of their humanity, but it just means, this attempt to compare something like the trans issue to like the Black freedom movement is ridiculous. I find it frankly ridiculous. It's not at all the same thing. Not at all. The black people in this country were enslaved. They were lynched. They were treated as second-class citizens. They were treated as this underclass that didn't have access to absolutely anything. In many ways, the black working class in this country has been the most revolutionary part of the country. You can't speak about class struggle in America without speaking about the Black freedom movement. That's been the main moments in the class struggle. in America have been the struggle against slavery, and then the next 100 years, the struggle against apartheid, which culminates in the political revolution of 1964 with the Civil Rights Act, and then in what comes after that, which is King trying to establish the Poor People's Campaign, the birth of the Black Panther movement in the aftermath of King. And that all has as its basic premise, okay, de jure, now we're equal. Now we have a racially integrated working class. Now we can fight a common struggle of working class people against the established order that promotes racism, that needs imperialism, and all these things. You can't compare that to, you know, someone that has a disagreement on things like pronouns or something like that. Now, I'm against violence against any community. I'm against disrespect, but you know, it's just not the same thing.
No, I didn't claim it was the same thing.
Yeah. But
60s, 70s, 80s, all the way up to the BLM movement. That was very recent, historically speaking. But when we're talking about who is being targeted by the extreme right wing.
Yeah, I think I'm against that whole targeting of the right wing. I think it's intentional. I think on one side, they promote on the so-called, I wouldn't call them the left, but how the political spectrum is described by Americans. On the left, they promote taking that all the way up to the most absurd points of operating on children and doing all these things. And then on the other side, they promote the opposite, just focusing on just that and you know, this whole hysteria around trans stuff. And I think both sides kind of serve the same interest. Both sides are probably know, we kind of know that they are propped up from the same types of institutions that represent the established order. That said, we don't want people who identify a certain way to feel antagonized. We have those people in our party. They don't feel antagonized. They're made to feel welcome. Why? Because they're a fucking human being, you know? And that doesn't mean that they should impose everyone else around them wear pronoun buttons or whatever. That level of extremism that was integral to cancel culture is what we're against. We're also against the over-sexualization of everything, which has came with the commodification of sex in the U.S. and in the West in general. So it's not necessarily an attitude that's against any one of these minority groups when it comes to sex or whatever, but it's how explicit and open and sexualized everything is that we also stand against, because it ultimately commodifies something that's integral to the dignity of a human being.
Well, frankly, I'm not gay, and I don't understand a lot of the arguments, but I like the fact that they are taking the time to attack the right wing's narratives, because a lot of the targeting out of the LGBTQ is just a rehashing or a rebranding of old bigoted stereotypes that have been used against other marginalized groups first. But even though nobody is actually saying this, I believe that the issue is children. It's the abuse of children. Now, the LGBTQ, I think, rightfully point out that the churches, specifically in my case, I would say specifically the Mormons, the evangelicals, and the Southern Baptists, are brainwashing their children. They are creating very unhealthy mentalities of bigotry and discrimination from day one, and bringing them up into the folds of the right wing. Contrary to that is, as you well pointed out, the over-sexualization. However, between the two accusations, I'd say that what they're accusing the churches of, and those institutions are rife with child abuse of all kinds. That between the accusations against the LGBTQ and the accusations being reared against the right wing and the church, one has more merit than the other.
Yeah, I don't. I'll say this. I think the right wing is disgusting. The liberals at least pretend to care about something, and we know 90% of the time they don't. The right wing right now just very explicitly just doesn't give a fuck about the sanctity of human life, doesn't give a fuck about anything relating to morality. If you look at the right wing, like a Nick Fuentes style right wing, that's the case. If you look at a more standard like Fox News right wing, these people are more hypocritical, right? They in public say one thing, pretend to be Christian, but in private they're Epsteinites, and you can't get more sexualizing than Epsteinites. So I do agree that to a certain extent, you know, the right wing part of that coin is a lot more sinister and worse. I don't disagree with that. Nick Fuentes is right wing, but yeah, what the point that I'm trying to make is that the center of cancel culture and that sort of political correctness style of politics that I think is now of a bygone era. That sort of politics would preclude, for instance, someone's conservative working class uncle from joining a communist party, if it was the modus operandi of how that party operated. This is why you'll often find leftists call us a bunch of mean things. Why? Because we're not willing to cancel those people. They can have different opinions from others on trans issues or gay issues or abortion or something like that. But at the end of the day, if they want to fight the class struggle, if they want to fight against the ruling class, if they want to fight against imperialism, you know, and they treat everyone else with dignity within the party, what's the problem there, right? Because if not, then the only people you can ever organize are people who already think like you, and at that point you're just preaching to the choir. You need to be able to work with people who have disagreements in various different areas, and the question is going to be, well, what is it that you draw the red line on? Are you going to draw the red line on war and imperialism like we do? Or are you going to draw it around these issues of identity and culture and how people relate to sex and think about sex and gender roles and all that stuff? And for us, that's way down far the line in terms of concerns. The essence is imperialism. The essence, the principal contradiction for us is imperialism, because that's the global form that the class struggle takes. And I don't give a fuck if you think there's two genders, or if you think there's 30 millions, or if you think we're all aliens that were put here, you know, by distant civilization. If you think that us as aliens should be organizing the alien working class to fight against the elite, you can hop on board. And that's what sets us apart from what calls itself the left. And that approach is not unique to us. It's just how communists have organized always. It's just that the left developed in the US a very liberal cancel culture. The fuck is this? This is so stupid. It makes me confirm I'm still here. It's like, they can't tell I'm here, I'm still talking. The left developed a very liberal cancel culture that is anathema to Marxism, anathema to communism. That was all intentional. That was all promoted by the Congress for Cultural Freedom, whose sole purpose was to develop a compatible left, whose sole purpose was to make communism look as unattractive as possible to regular working class people who are overwhelmingly conservative. Go to the heartland of the country. Most regular working class people are going to be conservative. Not all of them, but most. And that was the point. What we have today and what we've had for decades that we call the left in the US is basically the product of a psyop. And that's why to them we look like all these mean things they call us, just because we're not willing to make identity and these cultural issues the principal contradiction. We want to keep it at class and imperialism.
I'll say two more things and then I'll let you go. I appreciate your patience and I appreciate you not.
Please be brief, because we've had a guest here waiting for a long time.
Oh yes, absolutely. One is I think preaching to the choir is not a mistake. I think it's the tactic we have to employ. We have we outnumber the fascists at least 8-1, and that is our strength. You know, Trump is an example of populism on the right wing. We can have populism on the left wing, and if we're able to coalesce around some central tenets, then we should be able to defeat the right wing very easily.
Yeah, but the central tenets should be fighting against the system, and the system is not heteronormativity or whatever the fuck. The system is the Epstein class trying to suck us all dry of the labor that we put into our work for most of our life, that is trying to keep us as in debt as possible and cucked to the banks, and that's trying to send us off to war to die so that they can asset strip. That's the issues that have to be at hand. And if one person wants to cancel another one because the other one, you know, doesn't want to put a pronoun,
It creates division.
yeah, it creates division. That's the problem.
So that's why we focus on just a handful of core tenets.
Yeah, I agree.
In closing, I think we have a golden opportunity. The technocrats right now are supporting the right wing and Trump, obviously, but it's because they have identified correctly that there is new industry being born out of nothing. Social media is an industry, AI, tech, computing, even gaming, even social media and social influencing. Those are new industries. So, classical Marxism, we seize control of the means of production, and we cannot compete because of the cost overhead in the traditional businesses. Those are all monopolized now. But maybe this new growth sector can be dominated by us. And I think we need to absolutely seize on this moment to make advances. On that note, I'll let you go. Again, I appreciate you, and I wish you luck.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. And if at one point you want to join the fight, feel free to go on acp.us and help us organize this country around those principal areas that you were mentioning. All right. All right, that was good, and that goes for everyone else. If you want to actually get work done and not just sit around and eat Dorito chips or whatever, that would be good. Okay. Let's see. That was a long, but I think a good conversation. Asked a lot of the tough questions that people have misunderstandings concerning where the ACP stands. McDonald's, look, I'm not going to lie with you. I'm not going to lie to you. I had McDonald's today. McDonald's was my dinner. I had a double quarter pounder for dinner. I had fasted the rest of the day, but I did smack after my workout a double quarter pounder with an ice cream cone. McDonald's ice cream cone. All right, let's bring this individual, Daniel, up. Hello, are you 18?
Hello. Yeah, I'm 34.
Okay. What do you want to ask about?
No, I'm Cuban. I used to in Cuba. I just want to ask, do you think the communist is the better thing that capitalists?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a weird question to pose, right? Better. At one point in history, capitalism, of course, was better than a system that history was not ready for. Capitalism came in and it destroyed a lot of feudal absolutisms. It pushed history forward. It industrialized the world. It brought the ideas of enlightenment that spread the notion that all men are created equal. And it brought very positive ideals into this world. In the United States, it brought the idea that all men are equal, even though it didn't actualize it for a very long time. At first, it was only white men with property, and then white men, and then white and black men, and then white, black men, and also women at the beginning of the 20th century. But the ideal was so universal in character that even people who weren't represented by the system can point to it, call out the system's hypocrisy, and fight for rights. So capitalism and as a form of life, so not just a way of producing, but as a system of values and everything else, had a very important role in history. Now the question is, has it ever been able to live up to those ideals that it posed for itself? And the answer is, of course, no. And so like every other system in history, whether it was slavery or feudalism or capitalism itself, it develops, it has its peak, its golden age, and then it begins to undevelop because the same contradictions, the same relations that led it to develop at a certain moment in history made it undevelop and led to tensions and inconsistencies that people can see in plain sight. Today in America, we can see in plain sight that we talk this whole thing about being the best country in the world, but 80% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. We have a D+, I think, rated infrastructure. You go to the poorest cities in China, like I have done, because I've seen it with my own eyes, and you see cities that are a lot more developed and cleaner than some of the richest cities in America. We have people that are drowning in debt for buying a house, for trying to pay for a car that they need to go back and forth from work to make someone else rich, for daring to own something as ludicrous as a house, which you need in order to have a family. And then you have the audacity of Republican politicians saying people are not having families. People are not having families. Yes, of course not, because they can't afford a fucking home, right? You have people, the highest rates ever that we've seen of depression and drug use and addiction. And the American people is a sick people right now. And you're going to sit there and, I'm not saying you, but the system has produced this. This isn't just one administration, one set of politicians. We just saw in these files the whole ruling class implicated. The capitalists, the media people, Hollywood, Democrat, Republicans, both parties. Sick, sick people. Very sick people. That is the system. The system's purpose is what it does, and what it does is produce poverty, produce debt, and trap people in that debt, while a group of people, a group of banksters, finance capitalists, and their puppets get very rich. So by the same weight of contradictions that the system developed and showed itself better than feudalism, now it's coming down. And all that socialism is a system that says, hey, what needs to be represented, what needs to be considered at the highest level is not profit, but people. People are what need to be upheld. And if having a capitalist enterprise and having markets as auxiliary forms helps to do that, we're going to do that. As has been the case in China, which has markets, it has private property, it has its billionaires, but they all have to serve the dictate of benefiting society. What's the name that we have in the US for that? It's very simple. It comes from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, government of, by, for the people. That is the essence of socialism, a society that works to benefit society, to put the interests of people above the interests of profit. And you can make profit. You can, for a very long time, be a capitalist and make profit. But the point is that you cannot develop in an antisocial manner where you profiting and you getting rich is off the backs of other people, off the backs of society, off the backs of the degeneration of society. We have a society of OnlyFans, of people who are just parasitically trying to get people to goon and to make money, and women that are good looking have to sell their bodies, have to take fucking videos and do all these horrendous ways of violating your own human dignity in order to get by and pay for college or something like that. It was an epidemic that Fox News reported on it. You don't have that in China. You don't have that in fucking China. You know, so yes, today communism is infinitely superior to capitalism. And all you have to do to see that is go to China. Go to a country that has had a relative access to the global market, something every country needs in order to survive because the world has been globalized. Go to that country and you're going to see the superiority of socialism in the flesh. I went to the poorest city in China, Enshi, China. And go ahead.
Do you think the system right now in China is communist?
China has a secondary stage of socialist society. No, the system is not communist. No communist, fully implemented communist society as a mode of production has existed yet. It's a country led by a communist party in a transitionary stage called a dictatorship of the proletariat or socialism. And in that transitionary stage, they're building towards that society. But you can't have a communist society when you have a world that's still dominated by capitalist imperialism, when you have threats from imperialism every day and certain forms of manipulation. Of course you can't be communist under those conditions.
Okay, you say that any society what implemented communist, they are not full communists, okay?
When I use communist, there's many different ways that communism is referred to. If I can just make this point real quick.
Okay.
You could look at even the textual evidence of Marx and Engels. They use communism in 3 different ways. One of them is as the real movement of history. So when capitalism overcame feudalism, it was acting as a communist force. So any movement that pushes history forward, they consider that communism. It's a way of reinterpreting what Hegel, the person they draw their philosophy from, called the Weltgeist, the spirit of history that aims towards greater and greater forms of freedom. Then they speak about communism in terms of higher and lower forms. So a communism as a distant, remote, you can even, if you want to say utopian, I don't think it's utopian, but a distant remote future where society has produced such abundance that we can live from each according to their ability to each according to their needs, which is a quote that comes from Christianity. It wasn't made up by Karl Marx, where you have the kingdom of freedom and people treat working as a pleasure, and you know, that type of society that people bring up when they use the word communism, stateless, classless, moneyless, whatever the fuck. That's a very distant, remote future. The idea was that for an extremely long time, you have this lower stage of communism that eventually just gets called socialism. And in China now, there's even different sub-stages to that stage. And in that stage, you still have in the world capitalism that exists that you have to defend yourself from by building a strong and efficient state. You still have class contradictions within the country. You take a society like China, you know, there's still a capitalist class in China that sometimes tries to act in a way that benefits its interest. And when it does that, it gets stomped by the state. So yes, there's going to be a very long time, a very long period of time. I don't know how long it's going to last, hundreds and hundreds of years, where what you're going to have is a transitionary phase from capitalism as a world global form of life to communism. And that's what we have seen. China, when I say communist society, I'm not referring to communism as a mode of production. I'm referring to a society led by a communist party that in terms of a mode of production has a transitionary stage called socialism, where you have the dictatorship of the proletariat, you have markets, you have capital, you have all of these things, but they serve an auxiliary role to the centrally planned state-controlled economy.
Okay, so any society in this world is of the Marxist Leninist points, the 10 points of Marx, how a communist society is working. It's what you say.
Chico, pregúntamelo en español, man.
Coño, bro.
Estás ahí sufriendo con los 10 points ni 10 points. Si estás hablando del manifiesto comunista, los 10 puntos, esos son puntos que se hacen en el contexto de 1848, cuando hay revoluciones burguesas alrededor de toda Europa. Eso no es un plan de lo que va, como va a lucir el comunismo. En 10 años, cuando escribieron la segunda edición en ruso, se ponen a decir, ignoren los 10 puntos, porque ellos escribieron para que la gente obtuvieran la visión de la cosmovisión marxista. No los 10 puntos. Los 10 puntos fue la parte política del texto, no la parte de la cosmovisión filosófica. Ellos se ponen a decir 10 años después cómo los anormales estos se van a estar enfocando en los 10 puntos cuando la esencia fue el materialismo histórico y el materialismo dialéctico que está en el texto.
Y los 10 puntos del comunismo marxismo no se cumplieron en ninguna sociedad de estas que después implementaron sociedades comunistas, ya sea como Rusia, Cuba, China en su tiempo, Venezuela, que fue el último caso.
Pero ¿qué parte no entiendes de que los puntos esos no son puntos de la sociedad comunista eterna? Son puntos políticos de un contexto muy específico. Ese era el programa político de la Liga Comunista de la cual era parte Marx y Engels en el 1848. Eso no es un plan eterno de lo que es el comunismo, porque para el comunismo no hay nada que es eterno. Lo único que es eterno es el cambio constante. No hay una serie de puntos de, esto es el comunismo. Vamos a ver qué sociedad ha logrado todos estos puntos. Eso no existe. Eso no existe.
Entonces, el comunismo evoluciona a través de las épocas, es lo que tú me dices.
Claro. Y si eso te lo enseñaron en Cuba, ahora mismo cojo un avión para allá y le digo a Cere, tiene que cambiar esto porque esto está de madre. Aquí lo que le están enseñando a la gente de los manuales estos de los ladrillos soviéticos, como los llamaba el Che, está de pinga porque... ¿dónde tú te educaste? ¿Fue aquí en los Estados Unidos o en Cuba?
No, en Cuba.
Me van a tener que llevar para allá a meterme de instructor ahí en la Universidad de La Habana.
No quiero regresar a ese país.
No, que me lleven a mí a ayudar con el programa de filosofía. Pero eso es absurdo, es el pensar... voy a cambiar para inglés porque la audiencia es en inglés. That way of thinking about communism as just the 10 points that Marx and Engels outlined and what society has lived up to that, and if it does live up to that, is it going to be good, is it going to be bad? That's the most anti-communist, non-communist, non-Marxist way of thinking about communism. Marx himself, Marx and Engels, there's many editions of the Communist Manifesto that come out. They basically say, because the same thing that you're doing, other people did. The same thing that you're doing, other people did. They said, well, communism is these 10 points. And they're like, no, you fucking idiots. The whole point was this vision of an ever-evolving process and how we analyze it and how we change in accordance with what moment we are in. The basis of Marxism is dialectical philosophy, a fundamental ontology that says the world is constantly changing. It's changing on the basis of contradictions internally and the relationship of that entity moving imminently with contradictions to its environment. Everything is interconnected and it exists within a specific totality that it itself is in a process of evolving. And all of these elements are in constant change. You can't have that worldview and say communism is these eternal 10 points. It's incompatible. And so what Marx very quickly noticed is that, holy shit, people are looking at these 10 points and thinking that this is the essence. They came to start removing that little section of the manifesto from the republications because people couldn't understand how to read it because they had a liberal framework. Oh, liberalism wants this, liberalism wants this. This is what communism wants, these 10 points. No, that's not the point. Communism is a dialectical philosophy, so there's no eternal list of points that you have to hit in order to say, oh, I've hit communism. You know, that's not how it works.
Yeah, exactly. That don't work, bro. That don't work.
But the thing you're saying doesn't work. No one from the tradition says that that's what it is. You have built up a caricature. Lo que has hecho es crear una caricatura de lo que es el marxismo y decir, eso no funciona. Pero esa caricatura no es lo que es el marxismo. En ningún momento el marxismo ha sido eso. Eso es lo que tú no entiendes. En Cuba, ahora se están tratando de implementar medidas de mercado. Ahora Cuba está desarrollando zonas especiales económicas donde está dejando de que el capital de Brasil, de Rusia, de China, de diferentes países vengan, de México, y inviertan capital. Y están tratando de hacer el tipo de economía que tiene China, que es una economía planificada centralmente por el Estado, centralizada, pero con mercado, con la libertad de hacer negocios y todo eso. Cuba le encantaría hacer eso, pero no lo puede hacer porque está bloqueada.
No. Bueno, eso es un tema que podemos debatir en otro momento, no quiero entrar ahí todavía. Pero sabemos que en el manifiesto comunista está planteado que las pymes y las MIPYMES son parte de la economía socialista.
¿La qué?
Las pymes y las MIPYMES, las pequeñas y las medianas empresas.
Ay, Dios. En algunas sociedades sí, en otras no. En algunas sociedades en un momento sí y en otras no.
Sí, claro.
Ese es el punto, de que lo que vale es el contexto, el momento histórico en el que uno está. No es una receta para crear un key de socialismo. El socialismo es un proceso. Y en algunos momentos se ha considerado de que no se puede tener empresas pequeñas y empresas medianas. Eso yo lo considero un error de dogmatismo. Eso fue lo que pasó en la Unión Soviética. Y la Unión Soviética hizo muchas cosas muy buenas, pero por tener ese dogmatismo de enfocarse a veces más en el texto que en la realidad, llevaron a muchos errores. Y por un periodo de tiempo, Cuba, el sistema básicamente fue una réplica. El sistema fue básicamente una réplica de esos errores. Pero se desarrolló. Es absurdo. Mira, ¿el capitalismo cuándo empieza? El capitalismo empieza alrededor de 1492. Cuando empieza el capitalismo como forma económica. Nosotros podemos juzgar la vigencia, la eficaz del capitalismo acorde a cómo lució en los primeros 100 años, cuando habían revoluciones capitalistas en Holanda, en diferentes países de Europa, que fueron derrotadas al momento. Claro que no, porque tuvo que el sistema madurar. Lo mismo ha pasado con el socialismo. El socialismo es un fenómeno muy reciente. Está en su periodo infantil todavía. Han habido solamente 120 años de socialismo, menos, desde 1917 de socialismo.
Y todas esas sociedades que han tratado de implementar eso han fracasado.
No, bro, ¿cómo me vas a decir a mí que ha fracasado? Si mira China, con suerte, vete para China, coge un avión y vete para China. ¿Y cómo pinga me vas a decir a mí que ha fracasado?
No te alteres, estamos...
Hacer, pero pinga, no. Estuvo en la ciudad más pobre de China. Escucha, estuvo en la ciudad más pobre de China, se llama Enchi, China, búscalo, Enchi. Del distrito se llama Hubei. A mí me dijeron cuando yo llegué a Beijing, te vamos a llevar a la ciudad más pobre. Y yo esperando calles con tierra, tipo la imagen que uno tiene cuando le hablan, vas a ir a África. Y llego ahí, es una sociedad con unos edificios inmensos, grandes, modernizada, con una mezcla de la estética china con un nivel de industrialización increíble. Sin pobreza, se abolió la pobreza extrema. Nadie tenía pobreza. No vi mendigos en China. Todo el mundo tenía trabajo que le daba no solo para vivir, sino para salir todos los días. La gente en China no come en la casa, salen a restaurantes a comer todos los días. Aquí en los Estados Unidos, si uno sale más de 2 veces a un restaurante en una semana, dice, coño, déjame aguantarme porque se me va a ir todo el dinero. Entonces, lo que yo vi en China, hasta en el lugar más pobre, fue una sociedad mucho más rica, mucho más próspera, mucho más tranquila. Aquí en los Estados Unidos, dime una ciudad en la que uno pueda salir caminando por la noche sin problema. Sin que lo roben, si eres mujer, sin que te ataquen o algo.
Miami yo he caminado de noche y no me pasa nada.
En Miami nosotros sabemos muy bien de que es difícil. Hay diferentes zonas que uno va, especialmente en el downtown de cualquier ciudad, uno no se puede estar poniendo a caminar. Y si lo hace, se está poniendo en una posición en la que te puede pasar cualquier cosa. Hazlo 10 veces y una te van a coger. Pero en China yo caminé sin tener el lenguaje. Estaba en una ciudad en la que la gente no hablaba en inglés porque no era ni Beijing ni Shanghai. Y no me sentí con miedo. Veía a las mujeres caminando solas, hasta niñas caminando solas, a las 10, 11 de la noche. Vete para China. Vas a ver. Toma un viaje de vacación. Toma un viaje de vacación a China y vas a ver. Eso es el socialismo.
Sí, pero tú mismo lo dijiste que China tuvo que implementar medidas de mercado para llegar a este tipo de sociedad que tiene ahora, que es una híbrida. El modelo chino sabemos que es un híbrido entre el capitalismo de mercado y el comunismo de vigilancia estatal.
¿Qué vigilancia estatal, brother? Si aquí tenemos el NSA en este país que nos está espiando con todos los teléfonos, ¿qué vigilancia? ¿Tú no te das cuenta de que la misma gente que te meten los cuentos para meternos en las guerras de Irak, de Afganistán, de todo el mundo, que la gente que nos han mentido, la gente de la clase esta Epstein, son los que nos están diciendo las cosas sobre China? Ve a China y dime si existe lo que ellos le llaman el Social Credit Score. No existe. ¿Para quién existe? Para los empresarios que no le han pagado a los trabajadores. ¿Qué le hacen a esa gente? Bueno, que no tienen acceso a quedarse en hoteles de 5 estrellas. Ese es el Social Credit Score tipo George Orwell que presentan aquí en los medios occidentales. ¿Cómo te vas a poner a confiar lo que te dicen los medios occidentales cuando sabes que te han mentido sobre todo. En China no existe el sistema ese de vigilancia política. Y en términos del sistema, no diría yo que es híbrido, porque la esencia del sistema es el fin, lo que le llamaban los griegos el telos, hacia el cual la sociedad trabaja. Y el fin no es las ganancias de la clase capitalista, el fin es el bienestar de la sociedad. Entonces, cuando los intereses de los grandes capitales que hay en China, de los billonarios como Alibaba, el tipo de Alibaba, Jack Ma, cuando interfieren con el fin ese de representar a la sociedad, ¿qué le hacen? Se lo echan. ¿Qué hacen con los políticos corruptos o con los banqueros corruptos? Se lo echan. Entonces, sí, tienen medidas de mercado. Es una sociedad que tiene una relación dialéctica entre la base planificada, centralizada, controlada por el Estado, con propiedad pública, lo que se le dice en inglés State-Owned Enterprises, los SOE, y la economía de mercado y las instituciones privadas, que funcionan en un tipo de simbiosis para poder mejorar la sociedad. Pero la base es la base de la economía socialista, sí, igual, lo que usan medidas de mercado. Igual que en el capitalismo tenemos instituciones y relaciones de producciones que se parecen al feudalismo. Por ejemplo, cuando uno va a Netflix a ver una película, lo que estás pagando es una suscripción para coger acceso a algo. Esa es la esencia, pagar una suscripción para coger acceso a algo. Eso es una relación de producción que existía bajo el feudalismo. Pero no le decimos feudalismo o una sociedad mixta a los Estados Unidos. En los Estados Unidos hay un nivel de planificación inmenso. Todas las economías tienen un nivel de planificación inmenso. Hay un libro que te recomiendo, se llama La República Popular de Walmart, que detalla cómo la economía de Walmart usa mecanismos de planificación como si fuera la Unión Soviética. Pero, ¿hacia cuál es el fin? ¿Le podemos decir a eso una sociedad mixta? No, claro que no, porque el fin sigue siendo el mismo de representar los intereses del gran capital, la ganancia de esa clase. Y en China es lo mismo, tienen diferentes instituciones de mercado que han existido mucho antes del capitalismo. En las sociedades primitivas, lo que se le llamaba el comunismo primitivo, había mercado, en las sociedades esclavistas había mercado, en las sociedades feudales había mercado y en el capitalismo había mercado. ¿Quién te dice a ti que en el socialismo no puede haber mercado? O sea, no es que sea una sociedad mixta, es una sociedad que tiene el fin, que es el fin de la sociedad socialista y que usa todas las instituciones que la puedan ayudar a llegar a ese fin. Como decía Deng Xiaoping, a mí no me importa si el gato es blanco o negro, mientras que coja el ratón.
Okay.
Pero bueno, ¿tienes otra pregunta? Porque tengo otra persona aquí esperando para hablar.
Sube la otra persona, que me bajo.
Ok, bueno. Muchas gracias.
Que tenga buenas noches, bro.
Dale, buenas noches. Bro, that was the first time I've had an opportunity to talk to a Cuban. I really appreciated that. You know that? I really like that. Thank you to Daniel. You're finding this interesting thing. And guys, I'm sorry for my Spanish. My Spanish is horrible. My Spanish is horrible. You're finding this interesting thing with the Cubans that get here, that they leave Cuba hating it, right? And then they get here, and the life that they find is that things are not as they thought when they were over there. That fairy tale of the American dream created by Hollywood, that's not what they're going to find here. What they're going to find here is a reality that, as the Cubans say, van a tener que partirse el lomo. They're going to have to work their ass off in order to pay for the basic necessities that they had free in Cuba. Maybe not with the same level of luxury, but that they had free in Cuba. And the level of stress that they have here is not something that they had in Cuba. Up until very recently, I haven't seen recent statistics. There was more Cubans that when they got to the U.S. would go back than the ones that would stay. There was more Cubans that would go back than the ones that would stay. Because they say, you know, over there it wasn't perfect. It was far from perfect. There was many, perhaps, mistakes that were made under the pressures of the blockade. But here, I'm losing. There's people, guys, there's people that I've seen. They get here with a certain youthfulness. They get here fit. They're intelligent people that you can talk to about a million things. And you give them 5 years in the US and they're fucking fat slobs, disgusting slobs that haven't picked up a fucking book since they got to the US. That become mentally more retarded by the day, and that just degenerate as human beings. Even in their face, they look older. They're fed a bunch of junk. That's one trajectory. And then one day you look in the mirror and you're like, oh my God, I'm 32 years old and I look like shit. And what do I have going for me? I have a car payment that I got to pay $600 a month, work my ass off to pay rent, to pay the car, to pay other credit card forms of debt. And at the end of the day, I end up with $50 in my account every month. I'm not able to save up to go to nice restaurants. I'm not able to do anything. And that's it. And the ones that are able to save up, it's so little that the only thing they could do is go to various clubs in Miami and hope that if they get there drunk enough with one beer, they can sustain the high. That's what it is. That's what it is. And they go back. A lot of them go back. Or at least while they're here, they realize, this isn't the America that I was told by Hollywood. This is not the America that I was told of by Hollywood. Some of them even go far enough as to say, wow, cowboy hat, very good. Some of them even go far enough as to say, you know what? If they lied to me about what this was like, maybe those Cubans over there that told me exactly how this was like and I didn't believe them, maybe they were right about this thing called the blockade. Maybe they were right about this thing called the blockade, God forbid they say this in Miami, though. God forbid they say that in Miami, because Miami's filled with institutions. Miami, Tampa, parts of New York, filled with institutions that get billions of dollars. Look up the Cuba Money Project. Look up the Cuba Money Project by Tracy Eaton. It's a guy that all he does is trace how much money from these big NGOs and the State Department and the National Endowment for Democracy and USAID, all of these State Department institutions, the deep state, sending billions of dollars to gusanos in Miami. And then you wonder why they think the way they think, because they're victims of propaganda. The saddest ones, they have Stockholm Syndrome. A lot of them are exploited insanely at work, debt-trapped, convinced that happiness comes from consumption. After 10 years, they're $150,000 in debt, don't ever be able to pay that off. And yet they still think, a lot of them, that this is the best thing in the world. It's a literal slave, right? It's a slave that loves his master. It's an Uncle Tom, as we would say in the US. It's very sad. Spinoza used to say this thing. A lot of people read Spinoza's Ethics, which is his book where he talks about metaphysics and ethics towards the end. But if you read Spinoza's political theological treatise, he makes a very interesting statement, which in many ways is the question of ideology, right? Which is, how in the world do people fight to sustain their slavery as if they were fighting for their freedom? How in the world do people fight to sustain their slavery as if they were fighting for their freedom? And is that not what we see with these people operating on this very sick form of false consciousness? Especially the ones that come from Cuba and other countries, Venezuela. Do you actually read comments? Yes, I read comments. Do you dislike democracy? No, I like proletarian democracy. Blockade the ACP. How about you blockade your mom? Oh, okay, there's people here. I didn't know those people here. Danielle. Hey, do you have a question?
Yes. I'm going to try to use English so people can understand us, although mi lengua es español. Saludos desde Paraguay.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
I was about to say, if it was another Cuban, back-to-back Cubans, that would have been crazy. All right, go ahead, sorry.
Yes, my question is regarding Cuba, and it's about Grupo Gaesa. basically, I was reading about Grupo Gaesa because both people on the left and people on the right, they usually talk about the PCC. They usually talk about MINIT and all the other organizations that you have in Cuba. But I think Gaesa is a little bit controversial. I think every time I try to investigate about what Grupo Gaesa does in Cuba, like it looks like what's the term in English? Algo bastante oscuro. And I don't know how to explain it. Like I understand, you know, you have your vanguard party, you have your mass organizations, you have your trade unions. I get that part. I read Lenin and Castro and Che Guevara. And also a girl called Marx Lenin Perez Valdez. I don't know if you know her. Quite interested in reading. But you know, Grupo Gaesa feels like some kind of oligarquía militar. Sorry if that's offensive, but you know, like I felt like Grupo Gaesa is, you know, like you get my point. What can you tell me about Grupo Gaesa? Because it almost looked like a oligarchy behind of a communist symbolism. Like I think, like Cuba is pretending to be communist, but it's actually a military oligarchy.
No, I disagree with that because under any society that's communist, socialist, whatever you want to call the current state of any society led by a communist party, there has to be a strong military presence. It's going to have almost like a warlord style type of vibe. I mean, look at North Korea, very militarized state. And it's not because that's just the desire of society. It's because it's a society at war. Cuba is at war. The DPRK is at war. It's in a constant state of war against imperialism. And I don't think having a group of elite military outfits that are there to ensure the safety or the prolongation of the revolutionary process, to keep oversight over counter-revolutionaries and to make sure that any plots against the state are thwarted. I don't think that's contrary to what's needed to protect the experiment in the current embryonic stage that it is in. Now they tie it to like the hotel industry in Cuba and stuff like that. The hotel industry was, and the casinos and everything that was in Cuba before the revolution was the basis of debauchery. Cuba, as I'm sure you know, was basically what Las Vegas is today. There's a Las Vegas in the US only because at some point there wasn't any more of a Havana because of...
Yeah. Like they moved from point A
yeah.
to point B when they lost the island.
The Italian mafiosos and certain Cuban mafiosos as well, and others, the ones they worked for, right? The American Italian mafiosos, they established Las Vegas because they couldn't have their prostitution paradise, their gambling paradise in Havana anymore. But all the hotels and everything from that period still stays. And what does the state use it for now? Well, they use it for tourism. And they're in this very strange predicament where it's one of the main sources of profits and resources. And they can either use the profit to reinvest into the capital that allows for the expansion of the economy, which is tourism, or they can invest it in other social services and infrastructure. And that's a hard decision to make. It isn't an easy one, because if you invest it into like infrastructure, well, it's not going to be enough, but then you're also not going to have enough to reinvest the capital so that it functions as capital in these sectors. And the reason why, it's because Cuba has to operate on completely unfair terms in terms of international trade because of the blockade. They're forced to sell what they produce at a higher price, and they're forced to buy what they need at a higher price. I mean, they're forced to sell it at a lower price, and they're forced to buy whatever they need at a higher price. And why is that? Well, because countries are faced with the predicament, if you trade with Cuba, you're going to get sanctioned by the U.S. So you have to pick Cuba or the U.S. And the only way to make trading with Cuba viable is if they basically rape Cuba in terms of the purchasing price, right? So in that context, yes, it has to invest a lot into the tourism industry because that's what's that's what's making them money. They have to use that as a form of capital that's controlled and managed by the state. And then, of course, integrated into the state, whether it's Cuba or the IRGC in Iran, any revolutionary project is going to have this, this element of this military elite whose sole purpose is to defend the project from any threats, foreign or domestic.
Yes, I understand, and I'm not a Gusano, that Cuba is defending itself against the United States. They want to make Las Vegas 2.0 again. And that's why they have their portaaviones very, very close to Cuba again, like they want to do Maduro 2.0. And I hope they don't do it, but I think they will. But, like when I try to find information about Cuba outside of Radio Martí and all of that Miami bullcrap, I still find, and I still have the sensation when I watch Canal Caribe, when I hear Radio Rebelde and Radio Reloj and all those places, I have this eerie feeling that unlike the Soviet Union, where the Red Army was obedient to the party, I have the feeling that the party in Cuba is obedient to the FARC, to Ramiro, to Raúl, to everybody who is still alive. I have the feeling that the high military apparatus is the one moving las cuerdas. I have the feeling they are the ones holding the real politique, not the bureaucrats in the Congress, And of course, I don't want to repeat the anti-communist bullcrap from Miami that says that Díaz-Canel is apuesto a dedo, as people say. Like they call him and a lot of bad names that I will not repeat. But I do have the feeling that the Communist Party of Cuba is obedient to the army and not the army to the party like it happened in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I mean, in the Soviet Union, what's interesting is the following. The strongest revolutionary fervor came from the army. So, assuming what you're saying is correct, and I don't think so. I mean, again, I'm not in Cuba. I don't fucking have any relations to Cuban leadership or anything like that. So there's really no way of knowing. But had real power laid in that elite armed forces in the Soviet Union, maybe they could have prevented the internal counter-revolutionaries and the Gorbachev clique, excuse me. And there was attempts to coup the Gorbachev regime, and they didn't work. So I don't know. I'm against formalisms of all sorts. What I know is that whatever force is the one that's trying to sustain the revolutionary process, whether it's a military formation, as we see now in the Sahel region with Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, or whether it's the party itself, I put my faith in whatever institution has the greatest revolutionary spark and conviction. And in Cuba, because of the legitimacy and the many years that Raúl, Ramiro, and the rest of that original revolutionary generation, because of those years, they've kind of earned that. And if it was the case that what you're saying is true, again, I don't think it is. Formally speaking, that's not how it's presented, right? But if it was the case that it's this like elusive force working behind the party, controlling it, my question would be, well, if that's what's protecting the revolution from being destroyed after all these years, after so much pressure, I mean, the pain that the Cuban people are going through now is insane, bro. The blockade is really strangling Cuba. And if that's partly what's keeping it around, the sheer will of that sector, so be it. You know, it's a necessary evil, right? If you want to put it in those terms. But I just don't know enough about the phenomenon that you're bringing up to comment as with a level of certainty that I can maybe comment about other stuff. I do have two other guests, so do you have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, yes, I had a lot of questions, but those were regarding, you know, geopolitics and foreign policy. But I know that you are focused on your country.
Yeah,
You're not focused on fixing other countries' problems. So my question is, because I don't know much about the context of Marxism in the USA, why ACP when PCUSA already exists?
Because PCUSA is Zionist.
Because I read about Gus Hall, Angela Davis, and all those people. And my question is that, why ACP when you already have PCUSA?
Wait, hold up. Kristen Sapine, what are you saying? Kristen Sapine, what are you saying in the comments? Who do you need me to check out? Anyways, okay. The PCUSA was a split off from the CPUSA. We had cordial relations with it for a very long time. When we were just the Midwestern Marx Institute, I gave lectures for its People's School for Marxism, Leninism, whatever their educational thing was called. And the PCUSA, in the year before the ACP was founded, the year before the ACP was, oh, that's fucking, yeah, that's retarded. The year before the ACP was founded, PCUSA took very Zionist positions concerning the genocide against the Palestinians. They embraced a labor Zionism. One half of the party was basically labor Zionist. The other half was extremely obsessed with trans issues. And a good chunk of it, so let me phrase it in the following sense. Around 80% of the party, the PCUSA, joined the ACP the first day we launched. Why? Because the most popular figure in the PCUSA was Christopher Halali, who was their international secretary. He becomes our international secretary the first day we launch. And he brings many people, I want to say around 100 or something, which was the vast majority of that party, to the ACP. What's left is half Zionist, labor Zionist, the other half super obsessed trans sort of people. So why not PCUSA? Well, precisely for that reason. We never recognized the legitimacy of PCUSA as a party. There's only one. We never recognized the legitimacy of PCUSA as a party because they didn't work through the... If you know the history of what we had to do within the ACP, within the CPUSA, we were the majority in the CPUSA. The Institute and Infrared send their people into CPUSA. We win all local elections. The vast majority of the people at the 32nd National Convention were our people. Grassroots delegates that were ours. So we had basically won through democratic centralism, power in the CPUSA. But the leadership would not relinquish that because they wanted to continue supporting the Democrats. And so they purged everyone. And it's that purge that leads to the party, the ACP, forming. So the ACP is not a new party, it's the reconstitution of the CPUSA once the CPUSA becomes defunct, liquidated by violating its own constitution. But we won the struggle of democratic centralism. The PCUSA never went through that. The PCUSA disagreed for correct reasons with the leadership of the CPUSA, but they didn't struggle internally to try to correct the party. The party could be wrong, but insofar as you have democratic centralism, you can correct it. And it's the merit is on you to try to win over the majority. We did that. The PCUSA never did that. They just split off and formed their own party, which is historically what Trotskyism does. Not saying that they were Trotskyites or whatever. So that's the difference. The ACP is the legitimate inheritor of the legacy of the CPUSA because the CPUSA destroys itself by violating its constitution. And what forms out of that is the ACP, which is basically the grassroots people that had been radicalized and came into the communist movement as a result of Bernie and all these different things that happened in the last 10 years. And those were our people. Those are the cadres that are in the ACP now.
O sea que básicamente son demócratas rojos, pintados de rojo, no comunistas.
El PCUSA.
Sí.
El CPUSA, sí. El PCUSA son más o menos igual, sí. Es que ya no existen. Esa organización básicamente se destruyó cuando el Partido Comunista Americano, el Partido de Nosotros, se lanzó. Porque el 80% de ellos se unieron a nosotros. Por eso es que el Partido de Nosotros es un partido de unidad. En el Partido de Nosotros está la gran mayoría de los que eran del Partido Comunista original, que se disolvió. La gran mayoría de la gente del PCUSA, más que tenemos mucha gente que no estaba en ninguna organización porque todas eran una mierda políticamente, más otra gente del PSL, del DSA que se han unido a nosotros con el tiempo mientras han visto la esencia de lo que es el partido de nosotros, cómo trabajamos y los principios que tenemos.
Ya veo, una última pregunta y ya me voy. ¿Cuál es tu opinión o la opinión de tu partido, cualquiera de las dos me sirve, de Gus Hall y de Angela Davis? ¿Y debería leerlos para entender la situación del comunismo estadounidense?
Gus Hall fue una figura muy importante en el Partido Comunista Viejo, que tuvo que lidiar con un periodo muy difícil donde el macartismo había debilitado mucho al movimiento comunista, al movimiento sindical, y desde Gus Hall se empieza el análisis de que los republicanos y la administración, creo que era la de Reagan, sí, la de Reagan, era una administración fascista, y de que para avanzar una política comunista, lo que primero se tenía que hacer era derrotar la amenaza del fascismo que venía desde el Partido Republicano y aliarse con los demócratas. O sea que la política de aliarse con los demócratas viene de Gus Hall, que era una persona que en su juventud había escrito muchos panfletos muy importantes criticando esa táctica, esa estrategia más bien, no táctica. Entonces Gus Hall es una persona un poco contradictoria. Al final es una persona con menos, no voy a decir menos principios, porque él apoyó el golpe de Estado en la Unión Soviética para tratar de derrotar a los seguidores de Gorbachev, que si hubiese triunfado quizás se hubiese mantenido la Unión Soviética, mientras que Angela Davis se fue del partido y condenó ese golpe de Estado, porque tenía una concepción burguesa de lo que era la democracia. Aunque Angela Davis sí tuvo en parte razón en criticar cómo se manejaban las cosas internamente en el Partido Comunista. La crítica a ella es de que no había una democracia genuina en el partido, y era principalmente porque mucha gente dentro del partido no querían estar apoyando a los demócratas y fueron forzados por el liderazgo. Y nunca fue tan brusco como lo que termina pasando con nosotros, que tuvieron que violar de manera explícita su constitución para poder seguir manteniendo la política esa. Pero sí había una ausencia del aspecto democrático, del centralismo democrático. Y en eso quizás ella tenía un poco de razón. No solo se fue ella, se fue Herbert Aptheker, que era el historiador del comunismo y de movimientos populares más popular de la segunda mitad del siglo XX y del principio del siglo XXI. Entonces Gus Hall es una figura positiva. Yo tomo, por ejemplo, una crítica que le hace al socialismo pequeño burgués, de la cual yo bebo mucho y cito en mis textos. Y Angela Davis es una persona que en su época tuvo mucho coraje, un poco ecléctica en el sentido de que estaba por un lado con el Black Panther Party, por otro lado con el Partido Comunista, y por otro lado también siendo influenciada por Marcuse, que era Escuela Frankfurt y promovida, la Escuela Frankfurt, por supuesto, fue promovida por el Congreso por la Libertad Cultural para hacer una izquierda anticomunista. Entonces una persona que marca más o menos el principio de la degeneración del Partido Comunista, mientras que sigue manteniendo en una época muy específica aspectos y elementos muy positivos, que inspiraron mucho. La imagen de Angela Davis fue una imagen que inspiró mucho a muchas personas en Cuba, en la Unión Soviética. Pero eventualmente cuando se disuelve el Partido Comunista o cuando se debilita a un nivel más extremo de que el que tenía en los años 60, aunque en comparación con los años 30 sí era débil en los años 60, en comparación con cómo estaba en el 91, 92, era hasta más débil. En ese contexto, Angela Davis ya básicamente se retira de la política comunista y lo que se hace es académica, full time, profesora, escritora, y ahí la retórica es una mezcla de ultraizquierdismo con liberalismo izquierdista. De Angela Davis yo no tomo nada teóricamente. No veo ningún aporte, quizás otras personas sí, pero para mí yo no lo veo ningún aporte importante teóricamente. El aporte simbólico como figura que luchó en un momento histórico en contra de la opresión de los negros fue muy positivo, pero como teórica no le veo. Y a Gus Hall, algunos comentarios sobre la crítica del socialismo pequeño burgués, que lo veo un poco positivo, pero esa es mi opinión.
Okay, thank you for the conversation. It was a very interesting conversation to have with you, especially because here from South America, especially from a country like Paraguay, you know, like we are executed with right-wing media, so it's very hard to grasp what's going on in the world, and especially because usually here people in South America, we don't even know that American communists exist. You know, like people say, "Oh, how can an American be communist? That's impossible." Or how can a Cuban be living in America be a communist? You know, like I'm not gonna lie. This is the first time that I talk with a Cuban communist that is not living in Cuba. I had this mentality that, oh, they move to the USA, they get intoxicated with Fox News, and you lost them. You lose them, you know.
Yeah.
But this is the first time I find a Cuban American, or Cuban. I don't know if you are born there or in Cuba.
Yeah, I was born there.
But yeah, but you know, like this is the first time I found someone who is Cuban, communist, and outside of Cuba. So it was a very conversation, and I see your books. I know you are a very intellectual guy. So thanks for the conversation, and I hope you the best, because I saw videos of ICP guys helping people in need. I don't remember if it was because of a tornado, hurricane. I don't remember. I saw something that you were helping people in need that is very good, very needed for society. I know you are pushing for more, but you know, like that was already good, and I hope you keep doing it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words, and
have a nice week.
Thank you, likewise. Take care.
Greetings from Paraguay.
Thank you. That was awesome, guys. I'm always surprised by how much support we get from the Hispanic world. It's insane. I barely do content in Spanish, but for some reason or another, we get a lot of support from the Hispanic world. The other day, let me just give you an example. The other day I did an AMA on Instagram. And I also did a post before that, like asking for recommendations for guests for my show on YouTube. And the vast majority of the answers were in Spanish. I'm like, what the fuck, bro? I haven't done any videos in Spanish in I've done maybe 5 for Instagram. Now I'm trying to develop the Spanish YouTube, but it's insane. I really, really appreciate it. It's made me actually consider doing a very, consistent and intentional development of Spanish content. And I'm thinking, if this keeps going like this, we might have to start an initiative to translate the party's journal, Red America, to Spanish, so that we can start selling it in the Spanish-speaking world. Because if we can guarantee that we can get 100 subscribers from the Spanish-speaking world, 100% we're translating it. How did I decide where to get my PhD? Well, I applied to like 10 universities. I got accepted to like 3 of them, which is an extremely high rate at this point. It's hard to get in anywhere. I had a 4.0 GPA. I never got even an A minus in my BA. I had a full scholarship. I still had to go into debt, but I got a full scholarship that covered everything that was possible to cover. And I applied to every school. Not every school. I applied to like, maybe it was less than 10. I think it might have been 8. I applied to 8 schools. It was like 3 Ivy Leagues that were big swings. And for those Ivy Leagues, unless your family was Ivy League, or you kept close connections with those elite circles, you're not getting in. It doesn't matter how good you look. So out of the non-Ivy Leagues, I had maybe 4 or 5, and I got accepted into 3 of them. And I ended up going to the one that my counselor in undergrad went to in the 80s, which was Southern Illinois University. And Southern Illinois University was very special because when all philosophy departments around the country, because of McCarthyism, because it wasn't just the communists that were attacked, it was anyone who dared to be within continental philosophy. All philosophy departments basically became analytical. And if you were at all interested in continental philosophy, you would have to go to other departments and try to sneak it into like literary analysis and stuff. SIU was the exception. SIU, Southern Illinois University, had a department of like 45 people. The vast majority of them were in phenomenology and pragmatism and a wide array of different non-analytic philosophy currents. And I decided to go there. And by that time it had been so systematically underfunded that I think there was full-time 5 professors in the like six, let's see, in the 5 years that I was there doing my master's and then PhD. I studied philosophy. It was a PhD in philosophy. I became a Marxist in undergrad because I had been a follower of Bernie Sanders. I had this big event in my life that I've commented on a few times. My mom has my sister. She develops fibromes, and she's forced with the question of either I go into debt or I get operated. And either I get operated and go into debt or I just roll with it. She decided to roll with it. But we had this conversation with our family members. What do we do? And they told her to go to Cuba and get the operation. And I couldn't make sense of how is that possible? All these people I've ever said about Cuba is negative things, and about America, all these great things. But they told my mom, go to Cuba and get the operation. And that kind of shattered my worldview. That was my Badiouian event. And I started making sense of it maybe 6 or 7 years after, when Bernie Sanders started running in 2015 and he started talking about commodified healthcare and all the rights, healthcare, housing, and education that people in the developed world have that we didn't in America because of the profit motive. And that gets me involved in that campaign in 2015. And then I go into college, and I just so happened to have been lucky enough that the school that I went to for baseball told me that, in case baseball didn't work, if I wanted to study law, to study philosophy as an undergraduate major, because philosophy gets the best LSAT scores into the test you have to take to get into law school. So eventually I studied philosophy. From the first class, I fall in love with it. And it just so happens that my first professor was a Marxist. I ended up changing schools to play a different position, but it was in the same town. The other school I go to, the head of the department was also a Marxist, and he was the head of the DSA, so I get involved in like DSA. I played third base. And I pitched, and when I would pitch, I would play first base. When I get to the other school, basically everyone I had as a professor was a Marxist. My philosophy professor, my political science professor, my sociology professors, they were all Marxists. And people that were active in DSA locally. So that's how I developed, and that was me and Eddie. Me and Eddie were together for a good chunk of that. We organized the Bernie campaign in 2020. We kind of led that effort. And we start Midwestern Marx. By the time we start reading Marxism, eventually we stumble across Lenin, Stalin, and we're like, oh yeah, we're tankies. We went like straight from Bernie to Marxism, Leninism. So that's kind of the development. And eventually we start Midwestern Marx. It starts off as a blog. It takes off thanks to Eddie's videos, and then it forces itself to become this bigger thing, this bigger think tank. It becomes an institute. We develop a website, YouTube programs, presence on all social medias that are quite substantial. A publishing press where we publish books. By the way, for those interested, we just published a book from Alan Freeman, one of the preeminent Marxist economists in the whole world. If you've ever heard of TSSI, these people that were defending Marxism against certain forms of revisionist Marxist economists that came from Monthly Review, we just published his book last week. You can pick that up for $5 a digital copy, or like 15 a paperback copy. But so we have the publishing press, we have a journal, we have classes that I do. Right now I'm finishing up a class on the history of philosophy and ethics, Marxism, philosophy and ethics. So, and within like 2 years, it becomes the biggest Marxist-Leninist think tank in the whole country. So we end up having a whole new set of responsibilities tossed on our lap. We start pushing people into the Communist Party. We start trying to promote this sort of pan-leftist unity. And a million things happen. And eventually we help to reconstitute the ACP, which I talked a little bit about earlier. Okay, we have three guests, 3 people here waiting. I'm going to bring up PXE. Hey PXE, are you older than 18?
Yeah. So, I just wanted to say, I think that's short, since I'm a supporter, the executive of the Iowa chapter. I just had some...
Wait, what?
...on advice about writing and how to get a book published. I'm working on something right now. It's mostly like political philosophy, going through Machiavelli, Hegel, and connecting all of that with like Plato's Republic, dialogue between Machiavelli and Hegel, sort of going through like sort of how the role of ruling ideas and imperialism sort of like coincide with our mission as communists in the modern day.
Yeah. So you're asking me primarily like how communism could be seen. I didn't say Siri. Jesus Christ, my phone popped open. How communism can be seen in that tradition of philosophy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the big person for you to read here is Boris Groys, who I totally agree with, and it's a perspective that I had already, and then I read Boris Groys and I'm like, all right, I guess I don't have to write the book because he already wrote the book about it. But his view is that there's a fundamental distinction between philosophy and sophism. Philosophy is based on an embracing of contradictions and movement. And it's in the traditional understanding of dialectics as a series of arguments where, a point gets posed, a counterpoint gets posed, which forces the initial point to refine itself, and then that forces the counterpoint to refine itself. There's 2 routes that could take, right? When Socrates is doing that in Plato's dialogues with a general or a poet or a politician and inquiring about justice or whatever, when they don't know, it leads to the state of aporia, right? The state of confusion that comes from the Socratic method being applied. So you don't have the upward movement of the dialectics. You have just a collapsing of the presumptions that they had confused for wisdom, that they had confused for knowledge. But when it actually works and your interlocutor is someone who's genuinely interested in going upwards towards truth, you have this process that they call dialectics. Today we refer to dialectics as something else, but this process of dialectics is a going upwards. that in doing so shows the contradictory character of everything. The fact that these two positions that were taken to be mutually exclusive and opposites are actually, when you refine them enough, when you tarry with them enough, they show the unity of opposites that they're premised on. They show how they operate in a condition of dependency with their opposite. And this refines itself all the way up to a more complex and refined and systematized concept that takes into account in the concept itself this process of mediation. That's what philosophy does. It's a way of thinking through contradiction. What sophism does is the opposite. The point of the sophists, people who got paid in order to teach rhetoric to others, because that was the idea of what virtue was rooted in, arete in Greek. It was rooted in just advancing in the polis, advancing in your debates in the agora, right? Being the best debater you can be, because that's how you get ahead in the agora. What do you need for that? Well, you need rhetoric. And when you engage in a debate for the sake of just winning, instead of having this movement up, you're just trying to win and to have your side be the one that dominates and to make the other side look bad, etc. So that's the opposite of philosophy, because instead of showing the contradictory and the grayness of everything, what sophism does is present a very one-sided argument that smooths over and ignores contradictions. And sophism operates under a logic that's in the medium of money. It operates under the logic of the medium of money, as Boris Groys argues, whereas philosophy operates within the medium of language. And the argument that he makes is that communism, as a form of life, is the realization of the tradition of philosophy. And it places society within the medium of language for the first time, because discourse is actually something that matters and not just money. In capitalist societies and all the previous ones, what matters is economic power. In communist society, what matters is like actual discourse. This is why communist societies have to have censorship, because people's words matter a hell of a lot more than people's words under capitalism. Your word matters as much as your dollar within capitalism. In communist society, your word actually matters. That's why there have been historical procedures implemented to prevent forms of discourse that can lead to the dissolution of the state and the regression of the revolutionary process. And that perspective that Boris Groys has of communism being the realization of philosophy, I completely agree with. I couldn't agree with more. I used to phrase it in terms of Maximilien Robespierre, because Robespierre said that the French Revolution was the realization of philosophy. And I was like, well, close but no cigar. It's actually communism. That is that realization.
Right. So when connecting that sort of mediation of like debate you brought up, connecting that to like American politics today, where it's just like a spectacle rather than something that's like actually going on and actually like building upon itself. I would say that this sort of spectacle in American politics is more of like a social relation among people. And because of that social relation and because of the spectacle that is American politics, the ruling class just uses that to generate consent, to keep this sort of machine going, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's pure sophism. It's pure sophism. The goal is to keep up, as you said, a spectacle that provides us with the illusion that we have choice, the illusion that we have freedom, the illusion that we have democracy. But as you all know, we have none of that, right? So their words are meaningless. Their words are absolutely meaningless. You hear politicians from both sides of the political aisle talk about the working class and the working man, and this, none of it matters, all right? What matters in this society is money. It's democracy for the dollar bill. The more dollar bills you got, the more votes you get, right? So that's the framework through which I see it is these people are all sophists. None of them can actually get even remotely close to the ethos of philosophy by virtue of the fact that they represent money.
Gotcha. Would you say that sophism sort of takes on the historical function that idealism plays in philosophy?
No, because there's good forms of idealism that do take into account contradiction, but that focus at the level of the concept. But even there, I mean, I debate with myself as to how much. I don't think Hegel was an idealist in comparison to even vulgar materialists. He was much more of a materialist than they were. Because for him, the concept in German, it's Begriff. It means the gripping of something. The concept is always already presupposed to be incorporated into some very real objective process. So that's a dialectical form of idealism that's certainly not sophist, but it is, in comparison to Marxist materialism, idealist.
Yeah, I think of Hegel as like this sort of like weird middle ground. It's almost like a proto-materialist. But
Yeah, that's exactly what Lenin called it, a proto-materialism.
when you talk about like Plato, for instance, it seems sort of like Plato's idealism was like an upward journey from appearance to essence. And then what we see now with like bourgeois ideology is the complete opposite in some cases, where it's like a spectacular form. It's more of like a downward journey from essence to appearance.
Yeah, because it's postmodern. And
Right.
postmodern is just the return of sophism. That's what postmodernism is. It's the return of sophism. What matters is the surface. I mean, even a meme. What's a meme? It's a mimetic relation, which is not. It's not just mimicry. It's. That might not be the term. I'm trying to remember the term that Jameson uses, but it's not. It's not parody. It's mimicry, in the sense that a meme is something that rips violently an image from its context to then reproduce it on the basis of a certain vibe that the meme gives in another context. So you can have, for instance, that scene of Denzel Washington in the car where he just looks to the side. You know, that GIF or that meme, is it operating at the level of essence? No. You know, on the contrary, it operates precisely by ripping the appearance, the form, from the essence and just reproducing it at will at any moment where this vague vibe is present and therefore works. So that logic of the surface is the logic of sophism, and it is the logic of the political spectacle that we're subjected to. And to put it in a different way, this thinking about form and essence that says we must pierce through the form to get at the essence is not the right approach. That's the approach of the tradition of philosophy. It's incorrect. It's also incorrect to take the opposite approach, which is the postmodern move and the sophist move, which says really there is no essence. We need to just focus on appearance. We need to just focus on form. The Marxist move is to realize how dialectically interdependent form and content, or appearance and essence, are, such that the question becomes not what is the essence behind the form. Let's just go through the form and look at the essence, but why did the essence need to take that form? Why did the essence need to manifest itself? What was the necessity of the essence manifesting itself through that appearance or through that form? Why did the content need to take that form? So it's a much more dialectical question that tries to see how is it that form or appearance is operating as a moment of essence, not something opposed to it, not something we must pierce through, but something that gives us an insight into why essence had to specifically take that form in order to exist.
Right, because they can't exist independently from one another.
Yes, yeah. But
Okay,
yeah.
so in regards to idealism, I think that a lot of people, like on our side of politics, sort of look at idealism as like the opposite of what we should be, of how we should be thinking. And I would disagree. I think that idealism can be used as a very helpful tool. Like for Plato, like to read Plato against himself, or to read Machiavelli not in like this cynicism, but in his own like reality. Same with like Hegel and rationality as a form of contradiction. And then like with Marx and Lenin, it's sort of that unity of theory and practice, of like that consciousness and its connection to labor, philosophy, revolution. And it's just sort of like that arc of history. Because I feel like materialism and idealism also can't exist independently from one another.
Well, the perspective that I have is one that even like what dialectical materialism is, we use the term materialism just because that's what the late Engels used. That's what Joseph Dietzkin, who was the first person to use the term, used. But Marxist philosophy, as is Hegel's, is radically different from anything that before that was considered the split of idealism and materialism, right? Because in both, it is already presupposed that that this unity of being and thought is already presupposed. Mind and matter, whatever you want to refer to it, like both Hegel and Marxism overcome the traditional bifurcations that philosophy operates with in ways in which I think even classifying them within the old bifurcations of what was one type of philosophy and what was another is perhaps incorrect. But those are the terms we inherit of how they were classified. What ends up becoming the difference between the idealism of Hegel and the Marxism and the materialism of Marxism is more specifically rooted not in their metaphysics but in their analysis of society. For Hegel, Hegel wasn't Hegelian enough. For Hegel, the movement of history primarily occurred at the level of the development of the concept of freedom. What he doesn't understand himself, even though there's something implicit about it in his work, if you read a text like Plekhanov's commemoration on the 60th anniversary of Hegel's death, a text that Kautsky had sent to Engels, and Engels replied in a letter, "This is brilliant." And Kautsky said, "This is the only one of our guys who has read Hegel." Plekhanov makes the argument that if you read Hegel's philosophy of history closely enough, whenever there's a leap, he is always forced, in order to try to explain, well, why did the conception of freedom develop? He's always forced to go look at some development in the forces of production. So there's a Marxism that's already kind of operative in Hegel, even in the area where people would consider him the most idealist, which is his philosophy of history. And for this reason, I find it almost wholly inadequate to speak about idealism or materialism, because the presuppositions in both Marxism and Hegel are already beyond that. The problem is, of course, that not every Marxist is a Marxist. And in the West, we have had a way of very cheaply and in a vulgarized manner translating the insights of Marxism into language that reasserts it using similar key terms, but in the old dichotomies of traditional philosophy. That comes from the Second International. There was also vulgarizations that occurred, within the Soviet Union and like the manuals and stuff like that. I think in Lenin, I think in Lenin, it's not that it's there from the beginning. The worst parts of Lenin are the parts that he takes the most from the Second International. Lenin after 1914, I don't think there's a break or anything, but Lenin reads Hegel for the whole year in 1914. That's volume 38 of the collected works called the Philosophical Notebooks. And that very audacious claim that Lenin makes, you know, to understand Marx's Capital, you have to understand the whole of Hegel's logic. There's something to that, right? Because what was happening is that people were reading Marx's Capital, but they translate it into the pre-existing categorical frameworks that they inherit from Western philosophy, or even from more vulgarized forms of outlooks, right? And without that revolution in the logic of thought, not just in thought, but in the logic of thought, that's operative in Hegel and inherited by Marxism, it's very hard to understand what the hell is going on when Marx is writing.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that. That was a really good thought. I actually don't.
Yeah,
I hope
yeah,
to
of
see
course.
you around again.
Sounds good. Hope to see you soon, man. Keep doing the good work over there in Iowa.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.
All right, that was fun. That was the comrade Sean from Iowa. He's one of our executives over there. Great guy, doing his graduate work in philosophy. So that was fun. Viva Iowa! Yeah. Viva Iowa! Iowa supremacism. Okay. Chat's been going off. This has been the longest stream I've done. It has been fun, but let's see. Are there any guests? There's one more guest. How much do I bench? This is the type of question I like to receive. I always like to get just like fucking random questions about life. Nobody ever asked me random questions about life. State-owned Casey's pieces. Fuck yeah, bro. We need state-owned Casey's, state-owned Costco's, state-owned Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's is like the closest we Americans have to communism. How much do I bench? Eddie and I are actually doing like a friendly competition to try to get the 3 plates. I think Eddie's ahead of me by 10 pounds. Eddie's at 285, I'm at 275. The problem is Eddie's going upward in terms of weight. I think last time I asked him he was like close to 200. And Eddie is usually like a 175. And I'm doing the opposite. I've dropped 25 pounds. I was at like 225 and I'm around 200 now. So I don't foresee my bench going up while I'm cutting. And Eddie's just gaining pure muscle mass. So I think he'll get to 315. I'll probably end up going down to like 250 realistically. But I am able to get a solid like 6 reps with 225, which is, I think, important. $900 pounds, yeah. I'm actually Eddie Hall, disguised as Carlos. How tall am I? I'm 5'11", but I wear cowboy boots literally all the time. So I'm flirting with 6 feet. The letters about Stalin from the last years of Lenin, there's good scholarship that suggests that some of them might have been tampered with by Krupskaya, his wife, who was very sympathetic to the Trotskyites. Have I ever ridden a horse? In Cuba, when I went back when I was little, and that's about it. I want to ride more horses. I want to, it's going to sound super cringe, but the ACP leadership, at some point, we want to go to like the mountains and do a Kim Jong-un style photo shoot with the snow and the big horses. So anyways, all right, there's, I think, one more guest, actually 2 more guests. I'm gonna bring Bad Asteroid up. Hey, how's it going? Are you 18?
Saludos, Carlos, desde Chile.
Hola, saludos.
Mira, voy a hablar en español, que es la lengua que manejo mejor. Mira, yo te quería hacer dos preguntas breves y lo otro era complementar una información que no sé si tú conoces. La otra vez yo vi la entrevista tuya con Santiago Armesilla, que estuvo muy buena. En su canal no la vi completa, sí, pero vi sobre el tema del Instituto de Marx, un poco de tu historia, me encontré bien interesante también cuando describiste el sistema de salud de Estados Unidos, por ejemplo, entre otras dinámicas internas de allá. Y mira, yo sé que hay mucha gente aquí en las redes y por fuera que tratan de hacer como una especie de, por así decirlo, guerra propagandística con desinformación sobre China, fundamentalmente, sobre todo por el fenómeno de China en estos tiempos, pero hay una información que quería recomendarte que se llama Ley de Educación Patriótica China. Es una información que viene directamente elaborada por el Partido Comunista Chino, que es como una complementación de reformas que ya existían allá, pero que profundizan en varios aspectos, como por ejemplo, bueno, como lo dice el nombre de la ley, de hecho, en aspectos de educación ideológica en todos los niveles de la sociedad, en todas las capas sociales, profesionales, técnicos, estudiantes, trabajadores, fuerzas armadas. Tiene unos elementos bien interesantes que yo te lo recomiendo más que nada por el tema de que esta reforma de educación patriótica es un documento muy potente para contradecir la propaganda anticomunista y antichina por sobre todo. Por ejemplo, uno de los artículos de esta reforma que se puede traducir en internet, el artículo 3, lo voy a leer en muy breve por si acaso. Dice: la educación patriótica debe enarbolar la gran bandera del socialismo con características chinas, adherirse a la guía del marxismo-leninismo, el pensamiento de Mao Zedong, que allá yo sé que tú debes saber que Mao tiene categoría de pensamiento en China. También dice la teoría de Deng Xiaoping, la teoría de la triple representatividad y la concepción científica del desarrollo y el pensamiento de Xi Jinping sobre el socialismo con características chinas de la nueva era. También resalta persistir en el amor unificador de la nación por el partido también y el socialismo, y centrándose en la preservación de la unidad nacional y étnica, hacer del establecimiento de una potencia socialista moderna y la realización de la gran revitalización del pueblo chino un tema destacado. Eso lo dice el artículo 3 de esta ley, pero tiene unos aspectos bien interesantes que si es que no los conoces te lo recomiendo como lectura, que sé que tú a través de tu canal o tus medios seguramente puedes hacer un gran análisis, un gran aporte con eso. Y ahora pasándolo de la pregunta, mira, yo desconozco muy poco de cómo funciona el movimiento comunista dentro de Estados Unidos. De hecho, gracias a ti me podrías teorizar un poco y me gustaría saber, por ejemplo, qué tan influyente hay el movimiento maoísta o otras corrientes, por ejemplo, como trotskistas, qué tan influyentes son en Estados Unidos, y asimismo también tu movimiento político, tu partido, por ejemplo, qué acciones concretas realizan dentro de Estados Unidos, cómo se vinculan con las masas populares, eso básicamente.
Sí, muy buena pregunta, y acabo de escribir lo que mencionaste de la reforma de la Ley de Educación Patriótica para buscarlo, pero me suena muy familiar. Es el tipo de discurso que se usa hasta en la última redacción de la Constitución. En términos de la izquierda en los Estados Unidos, para hacer un desarrollo histórico, hay dos corrientes que surgen, que son dominantes en el siglo XX, que emergen del Partido Socialista Americano, que se forma en el 1904, si mal no recuerdo, y de que después de la Revolución Bolchevique se divide. Por un lado, hay una izquierda de ese partido que desarrolla el Partido Comunista en el 1917. Ese partido se divide en dos por unos años, y después el Comintern, la Internacional Comunista, le dice: paren de comer mierda, únanse y creen solamente un partido. Y por el otro lado están los socialistas, que terminan siendo como la especie de una mezcla de... El trotskismo yo lo veo arraigado en muchas de las presunciones del marxismo de la Segunda Internacional. O sea, de que para mí la esencia del trotskismo es el kautskismo, es el pensamiento de la Segunda Internacional. Entonces, la otra parte del Partido Socialista que no se desarrolla en el Partido Comunista termina siendo los socialdemócratas, básicamente, que son anti-Unión Soviética, anti lo que se le llama socialismo real, pero que no obstante luchan en contra del capitalismo y por reformas, ganan algunas elecciones locales. La tendencia esa se desarrolló naturalmente en lo que se le llama el socialismo democrático, Democratic Socialism en inglés, que es un término que yo odio porque lo que hace es presumir de que que hay un socialismo que no es democrático, y los socialismos más represivos que uno pueda imaginar siempre han sido cualitativamente más democráticos que la democracia burguesa, la supuesta democracia burguesa. No obstante, esa tendencia del Partido Socialista Americano se desarrolla en básicamente el DSA, la Asociación de los Demócratas Socialistas de América. Ok, por el otro lado tienes el Partido Comunista. El Partido Comunista se hace muy popular en los años 30 porque está en la vanguardia de la lucha contra el racismo en el sur, que en ese tiempo había una condición de apartheid en contra de los negros. En los años 60 es cuando se resuelve de manera de jure con lo que nosotros le llamamos la revolución política de la tercera revolución americana, que es la ley de los derechos civiles, que elimina la condición esa de apartheid en la que estaban subjugados, no sé si se dice así en español, en la que estaban puestos los afroamericanos. Y en los años 30 también hay un movimiento muy importante desde el Partido Comunista para organizar los sectores industriales de la clase obrera. Se desarrolla el Congreso Industrial, el CIO, el Congreso de Organizaciones Industriales, que es un gran sindicato de trabajadores industriales en los sectores más importantes de la economía. Y ese sindicato fue liderado por el Partido Comunista. Y había mucho poder en el Partido Comunista, tanto de que cuando viene la administración de Roosevelt, durante la Gran Depresión, Roosevelt tenía miedo de que en los Estados Unidos se pudiera repetir lo que pasó en el 1917 en Rusia. Y por eso es de que se le dan concesiones a la clase obrera en los Estados Unidos, gracias a la fuerza que tenía el Partido Comunista y a la fuerza que también tenía una figura de la cual no se habla, que es Huey Long, que fue el gobernador de Luisiana, un tipo que era un populista de izquierda súper, que violaba todo tipo de ley burguesa para poder pasar las medidas que él le había prometido a la clase obrera. Y era un tipo que obtuvo una popularidad dentro del Partido Demócrata, que era la única persona que quizás le hubiese podido ganar a Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Entonces Roosevelt tenía el miedo de que le podían venir una revolución o a través del populismo de izquierda de Huey Long o a través del Partido Comunista, que controlaba los sindicatos más importantes del país. Esa tendencia se empieza a disminuir a través del macartismo. El macartismo, aunque formalmente reprimía a todo el mundo que era crítico del capitalismo, a donde sí le dio golpes duros fue al movimiento comunista. Y en conjunto con el discurso de Khrushchev en el 57, el supuesto discurso secreto, la diferente propaganda que existió sobre las intervenciones en Hungría, Checoslovaquia, Hungría, Checoslovaquia, se debilitó mucho el movimiento comunista. El macartismo afectó mucho, porque lo que hacían era pasar leyes para votar a los comunistas de los sindicatos. Y cuando se votan a los comunistas, se debilitan no solo los sindicatos, pero sino los comunistas también. Y en conjunto con eso, se creó una industria completa que fundaron con miles de millones de dólares, instituciones, cuadernos, ONG, universidades, tanques de pensamiento, para presentar un tipo de izquierdismo compatible con el imperialismo estadounidense, pero que criticaba el capitalismo, que criticaba la cultura capitalista, pero que condenaba siempre con mucha fuerza, mucha más fuerza, al socialismo de la Unión Soviética, a China, etcétera, al socialismo real. Y esa tendencia toma diferentes formas. Naturalmente, a las primeras personas que fueron fundadas eran los que venían de la línea del Partido Socialista Americano, que no se hizo comunista. El DSA es un producto del anticomunismo. La Organización de Demócratas Socialistas de América es un producto del anticomunismo, y lo dice Michael Harrington, que es el fundador, que él sabía que él estaba tomando dinero de la CIA, pero de que lo que había en la Unión Soviética era autoritarismo, y por eso se justificó tomar dinero de la CIA, porque tenían un enemigo en común. Eso es una tendencia. La otra tendencia es de que con la debilitación del movimiento comunista, fue una debilitación no solo en términos de miembros, sino una debilitación ideológica, que lo que se empezó a promover fue este tipo de liberalismo, de políticas culturales, de las cuestiones trans, de un tipo de tribalismo muy anticomunista en esencia, pero que en forma mantenía la apariencia comunista, mantenía el apoyo, entre comillas, al socialismo real. Entonces, la situación en la que nosotros surgimos en el 2020, del 2020 al 2024, cuando se lanza el partido, es una izquierda que por un lado tienes a los demócratas socialistas, que de socialistas no tienen nada, que condenan al socialismo real, y por otro lado tienes a esta gente que se llaman comunistas, sean los trotskistas o esta tendencia se llama Marxism, que viene de un partido que se llama el Partido por el Socialismo y la Libertad, que es uno de los más grandes, y el viejo Partido Comunista. Los unes a los tres y no tienen 5.000 cuadros activos, no tienen nada. Pero esas eran las dos tendencias principales. Una que sí estaba ganando elecciones a través del Partido Demócrata, pero que no era izquierda y no tiene nada que ver con socialismo. Y la otra que no tiene nada de fuerza. ¿Por qué no tenía nada de fuerza? No porque el pueblo estadounidense no estuvo en condiciones para aceptar las ideas comunistas, sino porque para esta gente lo que era el comunismo era un liberalismo extremo en términos de las políticas trans, de las políticas de género, en términos del tribalismo, de la crítica de la blanquitud y de todas estas cosas que surgen de la academia, de un radicalismo pequeño burgués que viene de la academia, pero que se promueve en estas organizaciones por la debilidad que han sufrido por todos los ataques de macartismo. Entonces lo que se empieza a llamar comunismo acá es, de cierto sentido, anticomunismo. Un anticomunismo liberal mezclado con ultraizquierdismo. Entonces teníamos por un lado los demócratas socialistas que rechazan el socialismo real y que aceptan las mentiras macartistas sobre el socialismo real, y por el otro lado comunistas que le decían a la base obrera del movimiento MAGA que eran fascistas y que no se podían organizar porque no estaban de acuerdo con, no sé, la ideología trans, y por otro lado que hablaban sobre los Estados Unidos como algo que el socialismo sería el propósito a abolir. Entonces quemaban la bandera y participaban en lo que nosotros llamamos nihilismo nacional. Entonces desde esa coyuntura yo empiezo a desarrollar la crítica del fetiche de la pureza y las tres formas que toman. O sea, el socialismo real no llegó a realizar la idea pura que tengo de lo que debería ser el socialismo, entonces lo condeno. Desde el otro lado, los Estados Unidos tienen muchas contradicciones en su pasado, por eso lo vamos a condenar y no vamos a ver la dialéctica, las contradicciones y la trayectoria y todo eso. Y por el otro lado, la base MAGA no tiene los ideales cosmopolitanos, ilustrados que tenemos nosotros, los izquierdistas de clase media, y por eso lo vamos a cancelar. Entonces, en los tres instantes tienes una supuesta izquierda basada en los sectores profesionales, en sus preferencias culturales, y una izquierda que traversa el mundo con este fetiche de la pureza, de que cuando las cosas no llegan a realizar la pureza que tienen ellos sobre la idea en su cabeza, la rechazan y la condenan. Y de ahí sale el Partido Comunista de nosotros, porque éramos cuadros del Partido Comunista Histórico. Ese partido tuvo que violar su propia constitución para reprimirlos a nosotros, que éramos la mayoría del partido. El partido surgió, no me acuerdo si era como 15.000 miembros o algo así, no 15.000, 1.500 miembros. Gracias a nosotros mandarle gente, nos hicimos la mayoría, y cuando ellos violan su constitución se reconstituye el partido y es el ACP, el Partido Comunista de nosotros. Entonces nosotros ganamos la lucha del centralismo democrático dentro del partido histórico, y cuando ellos se disuelven a ellos mismos por la violación constitucional, ahí es cuando se reconstituye el partido de nosotros. Entonces nos mantenemos en esa trayectoria larga del lado comunista de la izquierda, pero técnicamente es una organización nueva del 2024.
Ah, ok, ya. Claro, mire, por lo que tú describes, el fenómeno es muy parecido al de aquí en Chile. Aquí también ocurrió una historia casi calcada como tú lo describes, tanto en términos de persecución como divisiones de otros movimientos políticos, y sobre todo lo que mencionaste de estas agendas políticas identitarias, que muchas veces, si uno las revisa superficialmente, claro, tienen reclamaciones que son justas, o sea, buscan ampliar la base de derechos sociales, se reconocen como grupos marginados, explotados, pero no tienen un programa de clase. Es un problema que se ve aquí, por lo menos particularmente. Y muchas veces también su límite no llega, digamos, a tocar lo que son las clases dominantes. En otras palabras, no tienen una apuesta programática que le haga grietas al sistema de manera real. Básicamente, una lucha, digamos, genérica por derechos dentro de la sociedad burguesa, que no desestabilizan en ningún momento el sistema. Eso aquí nos pasa, creo que esto debe ser una dinámica general de los países capitalistas, sobre todo con características neoliberales, con un Estado policial que se dedica a reprimir y a censurar toda organización que de alguna u otra manera por lo menos logra causar, digamos, un golpe mediático en lo que son las bases mismas del sistema. Pero me queda muy clara tu respuesta, fue muy contundente. Y por lo que veo son muy semejantes los contextos, por lo menos aquí en Chile, como te digo, muy similar.
¿En cuál partido militas? Porque allá nosotros tenemos amigos no me acuerdo cómo se llama el partido específicamente, pero es el profesor Artes, que es el secretario.
Sí, mira, yo no soy militante, pero sí he trabajado con el Partido Comunista Acción Proletaria del profesor
Acción Proletaria, sí.
Que él recientemente estuvo tratando de disputar aquí las elecciones presidenciales,
sí,
contra posiciones de ultraderecha. Claro, él es un movimiento de base marxista-leninista. No, conozco gente que es militante, he trabajado con algunos de ellos. Yo en lo particular no estoy en este momento militando, pero he trabajado.
Yo lo conocí en persona en Venezuela. Los dos fuimos veedor de la elección del 2024 y estábamos en el mismo hotel. Y en esa elección se puso difícil la cosa porque en el hotel en el que estábamos, cuando se hacen las protestas de la oposición, que después se encontró de que mucha de la gente que estaban protestando eran gente que la habían pagado desde los Estados Unidos y las élites venezolanas. El hotel de nosotros es surrounded, no sé cómo se dice en español. Se había completamente llenado el hotel, la parte afuera, de opositores. Y los opositores venezolanos se habían, en años anteriores, se habían rodeado, el hotel se había rodeado de opositores que sabíamos que en años anteriores se habían hecho violentos, habían quemado a gente y todo. Entonces tuvimos por un periodo de 2 o 3 días que mantenerlos ahí en el hotel, y todos esos días la persona con la que yo más conversé fue con Artés, el profesor Artés. Una persona muy impresionante que tiene un aura que se siente cuando conversas con él. Pero sí, no sé, si consideras militar, creo que quizás eso sería buena opción.
Sí, yo lo he considerado, sobre todo en lo que el CAP se dice aquí, ha abreviado el partido que en este momento es un partido ilegal. Aquí en Chile es complejo, me imagino que, bueno, básicamente cualquier partido de aquí que dentro de su estatuto tenga, por ejemplo, lo que es la lucha de clases, no puede ser un partido legal. Entonces se considera que atenta contra la institución. Entonces muchas veces los partidos de corte comunista, digamos, o que son antiimperialistas y que tienen en su base el tema de la lucha de clases, tienen que retocar sus estatutos para poder participar en la lucha electoral. Y como dice el profesor Artés, aquí es una de las tantas luchas que hay, porque obviamente existe en paralelo también la lucha que se hace en las calles de concientización con los estudiantes, que el profesor Artés aquí es muy activo con las juventudes, él tiene una base de apoyo
Sí,
en los estudiantes universitarios, sobre todo, y secundarios.
sí, sí. Sí, lo he visto en las redes. Es muy interesante.
Él tiene una entrevista que, mira, si es que no la has visto, te la recomiendo ver, que está en el canal Red Planeta del historiador español Oyer Pérez, no sé si lo ubica él.
Sí, sí, él también lo conozco, lo tengo, hemos hablado, no mucho, pero nos seguimos mutuamente en las redes.
Él tiene una entrevista, tiene dos entrevistas con el profesor Artés, las dos son interesantes. Así que bueno, eso, yo te agradezco por haberme subido, quedo conforme con la respuesta y bueno, sigue con tu contenido y harto éxito en tu proyecto. Que estés bien, Carlos.
Muchas gracias, camarada. Cuídate. Buenas noches. All right, that was great. I have a big event that I have to speak at in Spanish coming up in a couple months, and I don't get to do a lot of Spanish speaking. So I really appreciate when people come up here and I get to speak to them in Spanish. It probably throws off the algorithm quite a bit because I have everything in English, but then I have to speak Spanish. But yeah, it's fun. I like practicing my Spanish. I feel like if I go 3 days practicing Spanish, like speaking only Spanish, by day 4, you can't even tell that it's not currently my main language, but I do have to practice it a little bit. All right, I'm going to bring the last guest of the night up, as I am getting pretty tired. TPH, Trulo Safi. Hello, Trulo Safi. Are you 18? Oh, what's going on there?
Hello.
Hey, are you 18?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just want to talk about this. There's like a lot of things I ran into where I was like, I didn't like what other Marxists were like finding about it, like or thinking about it. Like for instance, my main thing is I think they gravitate towards the liberal understanding of certain issues because that's where they came from before, getting into Marx.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them, I think, is like marginalized groups, Hispanic people, Black people, etc. They tend to gravitate right towards the liberal understanding of how to fix those problems, which would be policing language, detecting microaggressions and trying to get rid of that, or representation. What's the other? Like changing people's ideas, right? And none of those really do anything. Those are all idealist things. So then to satirize that, I started making these Afro-German idealism videos where I just, play the other side. And it made me think, like, because you get accused of a lot of stuff, and you guys always have really good, like, Marxist videos. So I was thinking, like, what do these guys think of this stuff? Because am I just accidentally arriving at the same conclusion you guys found, Like, in my opinion, it's all about material change and possibly some internal changes as well, just to, like, facilitate the other types of change.
Yeah, I mean, I think that because of the Black Freedom Movement, and thank you for the donations, because of the Black Freedom Movement, America has become like less racist in terms of treating racism as like a ontological position of considering someone else, considering someone else's very being inferior to yours. That's what I mean by an ontological inferiority. That has changed. America is a less racist country by a lot. compared to the 1960s. Mainly because those struggles of the 1960s won real gains for the American working class. And for the Black Freedom Movement primarily, which was, I think, the front line of the class struggle. And so you get to this point in the early 2000s. And again, maybe here I'm speaking purely from my contacts in South Florida, which was primarily black and Cuban. You get to this point in the early 2000s where everything is fair game in terms of jokes. Racist jokes are very popular, but they're said tongue-in-cheek. You go back and you look at some of the old videos of the comedians, white and black, it doesn't matter. Everyone's like saying whatever they want and saying very provocative jokes. And insofar as there wasn't any real racism behind the racist joke, in the sense of you're taking seriously someone else as ontologically inferior because of whatever characteristic you want to point out of them, it was fair game. Like, look at fucking conversations between like Louis C.K. and any of the leading black comedians. They're conversations that, for people that had the sensibilities of the 2015s, are completely cancelable, right? But it's like, well, if you looked at working class workplaces around the country that were diverse, that's how people get along with each other. They share mutual racist, stereotypical jokes. That's just the truth, right? It might offend people's sensibilities, but that's how it is. I saw a video recently of some white guys playing around and busting their black coworkers' balls. They were drinking this grape juice, and they gave it to the black guy, and then they started recording him. He's like, "Oh, you motherfucker, you got me." He's like, "I don't want this shit, I don't like it." And then he's like, "Nah, actually I do like it." And then the white guy was like, "I knew you would, I knew you would." And it was this stupid play of like stereotypes that under a liberal, what the fuck am I? It was like working class TikTok, right? There's like people with hard hats on and fucking yellow vests. In this context, that's like the most anti-racist you can be, because you reduce racism to a joke that you play with. And as good Hegelians, we realize that when something becomes a joke, it's on its way out. Blue collar talk, yes. That's where all communists should be, to understand what the fuck working class people are like, if they're not themselves working class. Hegel has this idea that by the time Greek comedy comes about, it's a sign that the Greek form of life it's done, right? What's comedic about it is the gap between the pretensions and the reality. And that was what made like these types of jokes funny. The gap between what's being said in the joke and the reality, right? Take something as stupid as like chicken, right? Who doesn't like fucking chicken? That's what makes like jokes like that funny, for some people at least. It's the gap between the pretension and the reality, how ridiculous it becomes. And at some point, that changes around like halfway through the 2010s. And what ends up happening is that you develop this cancel culture that starts taking that level of the superficial joke serious and canceling people for it. And precisely because of that, which is very much tied to the Occupy Wall Street movement, because in the Occupy Wall Street movement, you have this massive coalition of people from all sorts of working class backgrounds coming together. You still have this spirit of joking around and shit. That was extremely dangerous for the ruling class. Then is when wokeism proper develops, which is this logic of focusing only on the superficial level of what's said. It doesn't matter if someone has spent their whole life fighting against racism. If they say racist jokes with their black friends or whatever, now they become racist.
I've seen this secondhand with my friend QB. Like, that's exactly how it goes.
So what ends up happening there, when that regime gets instituted, the regime of wokeism, it makes re-serious something that had been comedic and maybe on its way out. Maybe in 10 years, the jokes wouldn't have even been funny because they would have just gotten played out, right? It's literally HR mentality, yeah. And so what ends up happening is that as a reaction to that woke regime, you have these fucking retarded right-wingers and the creation of like the poll forums and 4chan and all this stuff, that just to be edgy and be controversial, they actually end up being fucking racist, right? They actually become real racist, and they start basing their politics on that. And you eventually get someone like Nick Fuentes, who does believe, if you press him enough, that black people are ontologically inferior. Get the fuck out of here with this ableist shit. And you know, that's problematic. And I think what set the conditions for the rise of this shut up. It's fucking hold up.
Don't worry about her.
That's so stupid.
She's just here to mess with me.
What are they, 5? The R word? Get out of here. What sets the ground for that rise of fascism and at the ideological level of people explicitly identifying with tribalist, right-wing politics, I think is wokeism, right? Because that's what made it edgy to actually be a racist and to say racist shit. Because you can no longer just say it as a joke, right? That position was completely destroyed by wokeism. Because what you said at the superficial level is what ends up mattering. So that's what ends up, I think, that's what I think ends up ultimately happening in terms of cancel culture and identity. And now it's been 10 years of that. And now everyone on the left is back to saying the R word. And
we have Trump, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's just unfolding as kind of how you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Kyle Kulinski or something would call it dark woke or some dumb shit. But it's now that moment is through, which means that the edginess of like the actual racists, it's no longer like the cutting edge counterculture. Now they just look goofy and cringe again to regular people. And it's about following these trends, right?
The other thing I think happens, and this is like kind of specific because me and my friends, we were talking a bit about like the lumpen, like particularly Chicago and stuff, like because you know about the GDs.
The GDs, no.
The growth and development or Angster disciples.
I have no idea.
Well, when they started, they were there to patrol and like protect their communities. They would even be involved in like getting investment going, building the community, etc. Which is like a similar story to most of them. But over time, outside intervention caused them to start to become more so reactionary. And it kind of established just like these two poles within the lumpen, where there's some revolutionary activity, but then there's also reactionary activity. And I thought of this quote that I thought of it myself. The liberal sees black as evil, or the liberal likes to play the devil's advocate. As in, it doesn't matter the difference to the liberal. All of it is the same, so I'm going to pretend all of it is good. And that's what I think is the trend of romanticism in the pro-black movement.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know about that situation. I know that there's this weird phenomenon that you see a version of it in the U.S. Because of wokeism, where like white people have such a deep white guilt and like a self-flagellation over the white guilt that it ends up taking a form of supremacism on the basis of their unique excellence in accepting their guilt. And that happened in West Germany. Because remember, in the aftermath of the Holocaust, East Germany gets established. It was all the people that were against the Yazis. So they have no problem of memorialization because they were the ones that were executing the Yazis in the aftermath. But the West has to deal with the fact that the same officials that they have at higher and lower levels were the ones that were in the Yazi government. And how do they memorialize that and keep up the pretensions of Western enlightenment, democracy, liberal democracy, and all that stuff? They ignore it for many decades, and then at some point they start thinking about it. And they developed this thing called the German guilt pride. They focus on it to the extent of admitting their guilt and memorializing their guilt through statues and different. There's many statues all across Germany memorializing the G-side. But they, on the basis of their guilt, end up developing a pride, because now they are the ones that can in a superior fashion, cope with their guilt and take accountability for it and memorialize it and embody that memorialization in artifacts and in plaques and in all these different things. And so you have a paradox where through their guilt, they end up developing back to a position of supremacism. Yeah, we're better, not because we're Anglos or the chosen race anymore, but because we're the ones that are the best able to deal with our crimes of the past. Other people, everyone makes crimes. No one has been better than us at dealing with that guilt. And so you end up having the process of something turning into its opposite, and guilt turns into pride, into this supremacist pride. The same thing kind of happens with these extremely woke white people in the US. They self-flagellate themselves to the point where they end up at a position of supremacy, of white supremacy, because for them, whiteness is still a thing that matters, except that it matters for them in a negative sense because they're stuck on the guilt. And it's like, well, I'm very Baldwin-pilled when it comes to this, James Baldwin. The whole point is to get over whiteness, to not have to need whiteness, either as something that you use as a crutch for yourself, or as something that you use in a negative sense through this supposed negative relationship to, as something that you don't want to be, to the extent that you take up all this guilt on you, because you end up developing the sense of pride in how capable you are in taking up your guilt. And that's part of the essence of wokeism, phenomenologically, at the level of how it's experienced. That is the essence of wokeism. You get white women like the one that's been attacking the ACP. She's going out there and she's like, oh, the Cuban man, the Cuban man. It's like, you could tell, she likes, it's this weird, very weird predicament where a whole lot of white guilt, and it leads to a form of white supremacism. And you could tell deep down she's intimidated by the fact that our party is composed at the level of leadership primarily by brown men. I'm not only a Cuban, but I'm like a Cuban in terms of the races lingo of the South. I'm technically a quadroon because I have two grandparents that are black, which is structurally how most Cubans are, right? 25% of Cuban so-called DNA is black, African, Afro-descendant. In terms of my everyday life, I mean, the only religion that I practiced when I was growing up was Afro-Cuban. It was the Orichas, right? A West African religion. The music, the Afro-Cuban music that structures my early life. The set of values that I inherit from this relationship to the religion. Very African values, how I think about honor, how I think about what it means to be a man. Those sorts of things. That's just me. Then you have Haz, who's Afro-Asiatic, right? Lebanese background. You have Chris, who's like Greek, which has always been Greece and Ireland and the Slavs have always been the N-words of Europe, right? But Greek and also Iranian. Another member, Kyle, Jewish on one side, Native American on the other, right? So Noah, Slavic, the Georgians. The Georgians are extremely discriminated against as a Slavic people. So when you start to look at it, it's like, well, it's kind of the most diverse leadership that you have. The PSL has a lot of, not to attack the PSL, they present themselves as very diverse through their cadre, but the leadership is just a bunch of Beckers, just a bunch of white dudes. But they're not problematic, right, for this fucking girl. They're not problematic. Who are problematic are these like Mongolian hordes of Afro-Asiatic ACP leaders. It's literally like we have a white representation problem. Like white people are underrepresented in our party. And at least in leadership, right? If there's 7 of us, the only one that's purely white is Jackson. In terms, well, I guess Eddie, a little bit white, but it's like, yeah, DI for white people now. White people. But yeah, and I can't imagine that part of the visceral hate this woman has for us is just that we don't operate with that white guilt. For us, it's going to sound kind of woke, right? But for us, like, whiteness as a way of relating to the world, as a way of relating to this thing called black people, this racialism, we see that as inherently tied to capitalist modernity. And the point is to overcome that. And you don't do that through like tone policing and all this shit. You do that through just mocking it to the point of mocking it on the basis of actually not being fucking racist and bigoted. And not tone policing, because when you tone police, you give it more weight than you should.
Yeah, I want to know what you think of this, because I really don't know what like the solution here is. Like, I think amongst the lumpen, like, the culture itself has been changed from revolutionary to reactionary. I think they turned strength and common struggle into machismo, the same kind you see in a pre-fash society. They've turned that same kind of struggle into factionalism, or identity into factionalism, perhaps. I think I have one more example. That's the general direction, like that's kind of a turn toward aimless militants and hypermasculinity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you undo that, or perhaps turn people in this situation towards Marxism, or just some kind of alignment?
That's a very difficult question. The lumpen has always been a very indeterminate class, in the sense that it could get, because of its extreme poverty and disenfranchisement, it's this underclass that could be hired to be scabs, and back in the 19th century, they were hired basically to be slave catchers. Today, I wonder what percentage of like ICE people who just sign up for the 50K are like lumpen background, right? It's a lot of Hispanics. It's an insane amount of Hispanics in ICE. How do you undo that? I think through education. And education is not just like, here, read books. Education is like a transformation in people's being in the world. Not to get too jargony, but this is where I think Heidegger is an important thinker, because he forces us to think about the human being in a way that's much more expansive than just a Cartesian subject, as just res cogitans, a thinking substance. When you think about the human being as simply a thinking substance, education becomes like, here's some ideas, or here's some historical facts, or, you know, here's some tools for you to think. But education is much more comprehensive. It captures how we relate to space, how we relate to other people, how we literally just are in the world. And that requires a profound, that level of change is much more profound. And that's the real stuff that culture and education make up. And the thing is, how do you change people in that predicament? Well, in the same way you change people that are not even in that predicament, but that are in other forms of bourgeois ways of being in the world. You change it by building dual power. Because people's actions and habits and the way they are in the world, it's always located and inhabiting specific worlds. And those worlds and actions and habits are tied to certain institutions. In the lumpen world, it's whether it's crime life or whatever it might be, the gang violence or something. The point is to build dual power, because dual power is setting up alternative institutions that function quite literally as different worlds, in the sense that when people come into them and they get assimilated into them, what they're transforming is not just at the level of different ideas, but a different way of being in the world, a much more comprehensive change. So the only way that you can actually change these sectors, or even other sectors that have different ways of being problematic for the communist movement, is by building alternative institutions guided by a different logic of existence, a different Lebenswelt, a different life world, and having a process whereby, in order to be fully included, they need to assimilate that different logic of being in the world. And that's what we call our reserve category. The reserve category, people take 3 months to become cadre members, but they're like tested. You know, are you actually capable of being assimilated into the culture of this revolutionary organization that we're trying to build? Or are you not, right? Maybe you just stay as a reserve, giving the party your $15 a month, and that's your role. You don't want to have that comprehensive transformation. You want to support us financially and just have other people be the cadres. But to be the cadre, you need to undergo this profound, almost like cultural revolution. And it's not perfect. It's still something, of course, that's being worked on. But you know, that applies not just to lumpen, but to people coming from professional backgrounds, which could be as much, if not more, problematic in terms of the individualism and the liberalism and all these different things.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Me and my friends, and it was not good, but we were looking over the last year's halftime show, the Kendrick one, and I just couldn't help but see the things I was talking about, and that was after I figured them out, and I was like, I don't know, I guess disappointed but vindicated, like especially when they're lined up with their fists up and they're saying squabble up, and then Uncle Sam stops them, and I was like, he says too ghetto, and like, oh wow, this is the conservative criticism they make of rap, but what kind of timing is that? Right when it gets to the most reactionary sorts, suddenly out comes here comes the far right. No, like you have to observe reactionary and revolutionary as two distinct things. But like I said, the liberal sees black as evil, and they like to play the devil's advocate.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to phrase it. I'm caught off guard as someone came in with the username Torta Pounder 3000, which is very interesting. But in any case, it's actually 1:30 in the morning, and I have to teach tomorrow a few classes. So thank you so much for being here, comrade.
Of course, man. Yo, you guys have Discord?
No, the ACP doesn't have an official Discord. Infrared has a Discord. You can hop on the Infrared Discord.
All right.
So, all right, take care. See you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, thank you for all of those who watched. I don't know who that was, the TPH thing. There's people apologizing for it. I don't know who that was. Can someone tell me who that was? So people are saying TPH is cool. People are saying, I don't fucking know. Anyways. Okay. In any case, guys, please do consider subscribing to my Substack. It's the best way if you want to support me financially. Give me a few bucks. You can also check out some of the classes or books that we've published. You can go to midwesternmarx.com/books. We just published a new one. The publishing press, we just invested a lot of money into buying 100 ISBNs so that we can continue cranking out books. So if you're interested in helping us in that capacity, that'd be great. Another great thing you could do if you want to support the party but don't feel like you're ready to be a member is subscribe to the party's theoretical journal, Red America. You can do that at redamerica.acp.us. And of course, if you're ready to stand on business and fight for a new America, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to join the ACP. And you can do that at acp.us. Please do consider that. It's an important fight we have ahead of us, and we need everyone. We need everyone who's capable of fighting. But all right, guys, I'm gonna shut this thing down, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.